Hello, live stream. We're getting ready for Linux Unplugged. Yes, full disclosure, it's pre-recorded today, but that's no reason not to see it here first. We're premiering it on the Jupiter Broadcasting live stream. And then after that, we're going to have a rigorous post-show discussion while we get set up for our study group today. So make sure you stick around for that. It's a great day to come talk about Linux and probably learn something. So we'll get going here in a bit. You're welcome to hang out in Mumble Room and get it the first out of anyone else in the whole darn world, or of course watch the regular live stream. Oh, I think we got a lot to say about that. I wish I was a pickle some days. It seems like an easier life, you know? Almost like getting to be someone's pet. No responsibilities, nothing expected of you. I'm sure you won't accomplish much in your life, but hey, you're a pickle.
Proprietary software is not ethical.
That's right. No, it's not. Not even once.
This is egregious.
I've never installed GNU/Linux.
Honestly, I don't know what we do around here without RMS. Like, he's probably the most valuable host JB has, and he doesn't even know it.
You mustn't do it. It's wrong. I can't cry for them too much.
It's a good thing too, RMS, because you would be out of tears at this point. Too busy crying, that's why you can't install GNU/Linux, am I right? Ooh, I'm so excited, we're just about to get started. I'm also really excited for the study group because, little secret, I've already taken the class it's based on, and it's really good. Honestly, well, Chris would say Chris, but I can tell you it's all Elle doing really all of the work, and she has just been picking the best content to release, so that's awesome because whether or not you're a current Linux Academy subscriber or student, it doesn't really matter. We freed that content. You get it. You just got to show up for the study group. And when you get a Linux Unplugged in the same day, I mean, come on. What else do you got going on this afternoon that's better? All right, well, if you do have something better, don't tell me, because I already got my afternoon planned. All right, well, it's getting to be that time of the day where I just don't have any reason to delay the hot new release of Linux Unplugged episode 291. For the first time ever, you're hearing it right here on Jupiter Broadcasting. Wait, that's not right. That's not right at all. We've got our streams crossed, everybody. But one moment. All right, officially presenting Linux Unplugged, episode 291.
Before we get the show rolling today, I'm wondering if any of you in the Mumble Room are working on any cool projects we can share with the class.
I've been playing with some new things this week.
Oh, yeah? What?
Well, an old thing renewed, so I've been working on bringing Ubuntu Mate 1804 to the Raspberry Pi 2, 3, and 3 Plus. But in doing so, I have reacquainted myself with systemd nspawn, and I'm having a little love-in with systemd nspawn this week.
Wes talks about this all the time. This is like a way to kind of do like little mini containers with using nothing but systemd, right?
Yeah, it's a part of the systemd toolset that is for container management, and it can do most of the things most of the container tools can do. But what I've been doing is pairing it up with a piece of software called QEMU User Static, which is a fast processor emulator for ARM and MIPS and a whole bunch, and PowerPC, a whole bunch of sort of unusual processor architectures. And I've been able to create containers of ARM 32-bit and ARM 64-bit and actually do my build and testing on my Intel workstation using foreign architecture containers, even taking it to the point where you can bind mount into the container for things like X authority and pulse audio and the display environment variables and the X socket, and you can actually launch X applications for ARM inside the container and run them on your host operating system. So it's really great for sort of debugging and getting stuff tested.
Holy smokes. What's the speed impact like?
It's negligible overhead. This one certainly is, but I'd done this sort of thing inside CH roots in the past, but there's some overhead you have to manage there yourself, whereas systemd nspawn does all of the isolation for you automatically, and you don't have to do things like binding to dev PTS and all that kind of monkeying around. It caters for that, but in terms of performance, it's brilliant. It's, from me, operating these things and running quite complicated build environments inside them, it's like native performance. A lot of fun when you bring up things like system monitors and it tells you it's ARM 32-bit running on an i9 9900K with 64 gigabytes of RAM. But, you know, it's... which I posted on Twitter and had a few people looking sideways at the screenshot. But yeah, it's a really potent combination of QEMU user static and systemd Nspawn.
That is pretty great. That's a hell of a way to start a show. This is Linux Unplugged, episode 291 for March 3rd, 2019. Hi there, and welcome into your weekly Linux talk show that this week is packed full of community news, looking at the price of the cloud, has a bit of a rant about our home folders, a few picks for you, and much, much more. My name is Chris.
My name is Wes.
Hello, Mr. Payne. And this week, I'm super excited to say in studio, joining me is the CEO and founder of Linux Academy, Anthony James. Hello, Anthony!
Hey, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here. You got a nice little spot set up.
Do you like what I've built here?
I do. Very relaxing.
I know. The final piece really was that lamp. That lamp really did it.
Not the giant penguin?
That was the first thing I put in here, actually. Got to. Well, coming up on this week's episode, we got a really special episode because not only is Anthony here, but we're joined by an outstanding cast of characters in that Mumble Room. Time appropriate greetings, Mumble Room.
Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Hello, virtual lug. Yeah, in the room today, we got Bashful, Brent, Cheese Bacon, Daniel Foray, Popey, and Wimpy, all joining us to gather around the community news, to kvetz about our home folders, and to talk about, potentially, a real possible video editor for Linux. We'll see. We'll give you two different picks that we like right now. You can walk away with at least one of them that will work. But before we get to any of that, let's kick off the community news with a bit of an update for you Firefox users, which I know is a lot of you out there. Firefox 67 is going to take a new step to help improve memory usage. This has been something that you could do via an extension for a long time now, but Mozilla plans to introduce a new feature in Firefox 67 that will aim to improve the browser's memory usage by essentially offloading tabs you don't use very often. It's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, I think so. Interestingly, the bug's been around for 8 years and work kind of just started, but as someone who does use those extensions on another browser I won't name sometimes, this seems like a great thing to have by default. Now, right now, it's basically going to occur in low memory situations, and they've got a simple priority list to determine what actually gets unloaded. So first, it's regular tabs, then pin tabs, then regular tabs that play audio, and pin tabs that play audio, which seems reasonable to me. That'll probably unload the things that you're not actually using.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see the ones playing audio would probably be, if you're letting them play, you're probably using that tab, like something like a YouTube video or something playing in the background. It is available right now in Nightly.
Why are we not letting the kernel do the right thing? Because it already knows which pages of memory you're using and which you're not, and throws out the things you're not using. Why are we re-implementing this at the application layer as well?
Cross-platform compatibility.
Well, there's that. I think in part because they have to take whatever steps they can to reduce the criticism they get for the memory usage. Like they can't just wait around for the operating system to kill it, because people will look at their process list and go, 3 gigabytes. What the heck is going on?
So they're not resolving the issue by reducing the amount of RAM they're using. They're throwing stuff out that they think you might not be using, but you might actually come back and need to use later on, a bit like swapping.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. Yeah, I'm not saying it's brilliant, but it does seem like it would functionally fix a bit of the problem.
I do kind of like, for the Chrome plugin I use, I kind of like, and maybe it's just an illusion and it would all work better done in a different way, but it's nice to be able to sort of pick and choose, because I can suspend stuff if I know, like, I'm just about to launch a bunch of VMs and I want to keep these tabs, but I don't need anything to do with them right now, and I can unsuspend the ones I want.
That's a good point. Well, it'll be landing in Firefox 67 either way, which is currently scheduled to be released May 14th, 2009, if you are subscribed to the stable channel. So that'll be coming soon. Why don't we talk about Chrome? Seems like only fair. We got to do equal representation. I'm more of a Chrome user. What about you, Anthony?
I use Chrome.
Are you? Yeah. Yeah. I've tried to switch back to Firefox. Have you ever tried to do that?
I use that for my dual browser testing.
Sure.
So I got them both installed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It feels, I don't know why. This is completely arbitrary. It feels chunky.
Yeah, I feel like it's like Chrome scrolls smoother.
Yeah.
And the pages load in a little smoother. So like the perception is it's smoother. Yeah. I know that Firefox has made a lot of improvements. So I like to follow it. I do keep it like it's my second browser. I usually have 3 web browsers on a computer, and it's like my second one.
What's your third web browser?
It depends on the system I'm on. So if I'm on like Epiphany or GNOME Web, would be a go-to. Or if I'm on Plasma, a lot of times I actually use Opera as my third browser. If I'm on the Mac, I'll use Safari as a third browser. So it just kind of depends on the desktop I'm on. What about you? Do you have 3? Are you a 3 browser man?
Yeah, I use Firefox, Brave, and Opera.
Okay, Brave, huh? Yeah, I should work Brave in.
So
oh my God, you should.
For about
awesome.
3 years now, Brave is my only browser on my phone. So I disable and uninstall other browsers. That's the only browser I've used for the longest time on my phone. And I use Brave on my PCs for anything personal stuff related. So I use Firefox for work, and I use Brave for my home stuff. And Opera is I want to test how things are looking and working in another browser.
So what is it about Brave that draws you into it?
On the phone, it's because you get basically the same user experience and reliability of the Chrome browser, because Brave is based on that, but you get all of the ad stripping and privacy guarding baked into the browser. So you don't need to mess around with like ad blockers, don't need to root your device and put ad blockers on at a system level. The browser takes care of it for you. And you can opt into their, program of actually choosing how you monetize, the sites that you want to monetize based on their value to you as an individual. And the same is true for the desktop too. It just mops up all of that cruft that you have is just pervasive on every website that you visit now.
Okay. That's a compelling reason to try it out. I could add that as a third. I could see that.
I was a fully paid up Chrome guy, and then I think you convinced me to try out Firefox some time ago, and I switched to Firefox, and that's it. I stayed on it. Like once they figured out how to do container tabs properly,
yeah,
that's a game changer for Firefox container tabs.
Yes.
That was the missing feature that I needed to be able to successfully switch back to Firefox. And I think I've been on Firefox again for just a touch over a year. So whenever that feature got introduced.
Yeah, that's one of the great features. And it's the only way I'm even like halfway feeling comfortable ever going to Facebook is because I have a container for it. So I was actually queuing us up to talk about Chrome OS because there's interesting things developing over there. Two things that we picked out this week. Number one is on Chrome OS 74, they seem to be putting a lot of effort into improving the experience of running Linux apps on Chromebooks. So a feature they've recently added is the ability to actually run desktop Linux applications on a Chromebook. We've talked about this on and off. And with the new version, they're making it a little more like a real desktop application. You're going to get audio playback. You'll get hardware acceleration to be able to watch videos because that was a challenge before. You couldn't listen to music. You couldn't watch videos. Now, don't get your hopes up, Wes, because we're not going to be podcasting from Chromebooks. There's no support for audio in.
Oh, but I'd already made plans and bought several Chromebooks. Whoops.
I kind of do feel like it's starting to get time to get a Chromebook, though.
So what, this is 10 years after they come out
with
Chromebooks?
Yeah. But now they're finally, running desktop Linux applications. They're going to support sound and audio. I could see that. I don't know. I could see trying it out. I was thinking about for my wife who's writing a book right now. She just needs a system with a keyboard, and she's actually ended up preferring writing in Google Docs. I think she's crazy. I can't stand Google Docs, but she loves it.
There's definitely a class of user that would benefit from using a Chromebook with the added functionality of having a catalog of Linux software. But for me, there isn't a Chromebook that's manufactured that has got the raw processing power and storage that I need to be, to do what I need to do. And I imagine that that's true, not just for developers, but for people that are working with video or high-end photography as well.
Oh, for sure.
Right. Sometimes you just need a little more oomph.
Yeah.
Does that mean that creative professionals and developers are going to become more and more marginalized by their hardware choices in the future.
I think that's what's already happening on the Mac side. I think you're already seeing that reality on the Mac side. That's why MacBooks have 4 ports at best, and they offer them in like 3 sizes. And it's a total reduction of choice over there. That's something that my co-host Michael Dominic had to struggle with quite a bit, and ended up switching the majority of his workload over to Linux because of the limited hardware choices that he needed just to be able to build software. I think it is a big problem.
I don't know if you stepped into an Apple store recently, but they offer workshops in the store, right? Recently, my girlfriend went in to go do a video editing workshop, and all of their stuff is focused on iPad and iOS apps on iPad. Like, they don't have classes for video editing on their professional hardware in their store anymore.
Wow.
Crazy.
I wouldn't blame them. I'm struck by how often when I'm traveling and I see people at the airport or in an airplane that are using iPads, and the diversity of types of people, from young children with these big rubber cases around their iPad to individuals that have got to be in their late 70s to early 80s that are all joining the Wi-Fi network. They're browsing the media that's available on the plane. They're all able to use this device. And I've never really experienced anything like that in my life. In fact, I remember when the iPad first started selling, one of the things that was remarkable was that Angela's parents hate technology. They have one PC that they have to do like business stuff, right? And they've really taken to the iPad. They have several iPads now. And it seems to like cross a barrier for people that don't normally use technology. We're able to pick up the iPad. And so if I was Apple, I'd be looking at that going, that's a huge market. That is a way bigger market potential than the Mac ever was. Because the Mac fundamentally is a computer with a file system, you know, and computer problems and accessories that aren't compatible, like all this stuff that you just don't really have. Either the accessory is either certified by Apple or it doesn't work on the iOS land.
I mean, I hate to say it, but if you think about it, the reduction of choice forces simplicity, which for the mass market and what they need to do, specifically now what you can do with the video editing on an iPad. It's very opinionated on how you do it. It's how, you know, it's you don't have all the extra applications on there, the extra things that cause issues for the components, and it's
more limited, but what works just works, right?
What's the major workflow they're trying to solve? And then for every other workflow, that's 10% video editors, you know, high-level video production, high-level graphic production, so on and so forth.
Right. And I think the Chromebooks are eating into another area of this market, like an area that is more like Hadia's workload right now, which her primary thing she wants a very reliable computer with a decent keyboard that gives her good access to Google Docs, that if she goes somewhere to do a presentation, she can hook up to a projector and it's going to work. And if she comes back here and picks up, she has a laptop running Plasma, Kubuntu, that she can open that up and get access to the same dock, and she can open up on her phone and read the same dock. That's what her main use case is. For her, it's kind of hard not to say, well, that's a Chromebook.
Well, now if she has audio in her presentation, right. it'll work.
Yeah, she could install Open Office Presenter or LibreOffice Presenter or whatever and give a presentation.
You know, what's interesting is and you probably already know the answer to this, because honestly, I've never been that interested in the Chromebooks to look into it. But for what they're trying to do to get the Linux apps and components working on there, and for as bare minimum and as configurable you can make a similar lightweight desktop for that, it's interesting they decided just to go a whole route of a whole operating system, because it's now almost like, hey, all you need is a browser, except for that's not true. You need these other things. So we're just going to add it in there where it already exists.
Yeah. I think that's about reaching the developer market. I think it's about trying to reach a more technical audience and bringing, and like they've reached a certain saturation with the Chromebook, and now they want to get that market that maybe needs a text editor, wants their favorite terminal, maybe needs GIMP, and wants to be able to SSH into their box that they're working on or something like that.
Right, just enough technical tools to keep you placated.
Yeah, or maybe Android Studio. Maybe they're targeting Android developers in the future. Make an Android development workstation out of Chrome OS.
That's true.
I wonder if the dumbed-down devices are going to maintain that hold as the generations kind of move on. Like looking at the people who've grown up with technology and whether they're going to want to be able to directly access the power versus kind of having that dumbed down experience, which sure, maybe was great for, you know, my dad who's 70 and a bald cowboy who loves it. But, You know, what about the people that grew up with it?
Wait, is your dad really a cowboy?
Yeah,
Is that
that's
true?
a whole other story. Yeah, I grew up in the prairies.
Canada has cowboys and prairies?
Oh, yeah. We got lots and lots.
Tons.
I thought
Whole
okay,
provinces.
all right. I don't understand this. I gotta learn the history of cowboys.
Even in British Columbia, there's a very large cattle industry, and then you just start going east, all the way to Manitoba, all the way into Ontario. It's full cattle country.
Of course. It makes total sense.
Can we think seriously about the phrase dumbed down? Like, you look how powerful the iPhone and Android devices and the iPad is. Like, there are people now being empowered to be able to do stuff like video editing or even just like simple photo editing or full-on design with an Apple Pencil and iPad Pro. Stuff that was absolutely not possible 10 years ago on a bog standard PC or even a high-end PC, or stuff that would have been very difficult and out of the price range of mere mortals. I think dumbing down is the wrong phrase, because just because we think that we had the capability to do those things a few years ago, there's a much wider and diverse range of the population who are enabled with these devices and are able to do stuff that they would never have dreamed doing before with a thing that they can carry around in their pocket or a thing they can put in their purse.
That's a good point. I guess after having said dumbed down and hearing that context, I actually agree with you.
Yeah, I can agree completely too in the photography space, because I've seen huge, massive swaths of populations getting amazing cameras in their pockets. And my initial reaction many, many years ago was like, oh, as a photographer, like all these people are taking photos that feel substandard to what I'm creating. But now these days, that perspective has completely changed. And I think enabling anyone to be creative in any way, whether it be photography or design or even some audio stuff, it feels like everybody can get a voice for much less buy-in to this technology. It's really a huge success for the population.
It feels like a reset, like we've gone along like kind of an uphill, like a bit like Moore's law, like it's going up and up and up and up and up, and then we've kind of jumped down a tiny bit in power. In like, these devices are very powerful, but they're not i9. And we've kind of gone down, but we've gone up in usability and up with the capability, the creative capability of these devices and the empowerment that these things give you, even if we haven't gone like full on with power. But that will come. I think that, every year a new Apple chip comes out, or a new Qualcomm chip comes out that's more powerful than everything that's ever been before it. I think we just had a bit of a reset for a short period, and it will climb again.
Maybe. I hate to compare computers to cars, but if you look at cars and you consider how much has changed in the last 50 years on what's accessible under the hood, or how complicated they are, or how productized they are, you could see technology going that general trend where the hood is a little more welded shut, as the old saying goes, but the consumer isn't disadvantaged to say. They're disadvantaged in terms of getting access to those components, but they're enabled by the plentiful accessibility to the technology, the reduction in cost, the market options. Like there's other things that improve when other things are taken away. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but and I've made this point on the show before, but having worked in education, then taking 10 years off and then going back, there was a huge, huge gap in the interest the students had. We could fill 3 labs of students, 30 students each in each lab. When the first time I was in the education system, when I came back, it was a team of 5 students.
So can I jump on this car analogy real quick? I don't know if this makes sense. It makes sense in my head. So follow with me here.
Okay.
So it's a new baseline, right? So I can talk to this to the videos. We'll start with a car. If you think about it, 30 years ago, or even when I was growing up, 18, 19 years ago as a teenager, it used to be the coolest thing ever to be able to change your oil or change your headlight, right? Something you would want to know. You get in there like, hey, I can change my oil. Right. Nowadays, you got to take off the first part of the car to be able to change your oil. But instead of having teenagers or whoever's interested in cars, like, hey, I can change my oil, they're now modding their cars from a higher standpoint with this new technology implementation, right? Like, and I haven't dove much into it. I've just seen some stories on it. But same thing for video. 15 years ago, to see some of the basic iPhone editing stuff, that was professional level $10,000 to have made, needed giant computers, but the baseline of knowledge, the baseline of capability for the upcoming generations starts off with what used to seem impossible for us to achieve.
Yeah.
Now that just means, what's that next impossible step that seems impossible to them that we can't even imagine?
Yeah, you're right. To Popey's point, like it's more people have access to. Like my daughter has an iPad with like a 1080p stabilized camera in it. She has an HD camera in her tablet. Like I would have loved to have something like that when I was 6 years old.
I always wanted to have one of those Game Gears that plugged in the TV antenna.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I remember my first car. I remember had to do some maintenance on it, and I stripped the engine down and reground the valves, and I put a new drive shaft on it, and I did loads of work on that car. These days, there's no way I'm going to do that. I'll throw it at a man and give him a small bag of money and hope he fixes it for me. But there are people out there who still want to do that. I think that's the key. Is there are still people out there on Linux, for example, who still like editing their xorg.conf, whereas the vast majority of people don't care about that kind of thing and don't really want to do that. They just want the thing to work. And I think the iPad and these generations of devices service a very large proportion of the population who don't want to put their hands under the bonnet of a car and don't want to edit an xorg.conf. They want to edit a video, and this services that need perfectly.
We can have both, right? Yeah, like we live in a world where you can have iPads and you can go get a Raspberry Pi to play around with.
But do you think that Linux can offer both? Like I remember Linux, maybe even 10 years ago, was a lot more tinkery than it is now. It seems to be getting far more user-friendly. So do you think that we can get there and offer both for anybody in the same package?
I feel like that's kind of a fair criticism. I think that is true to a degree.
I've never installed GNU/Linux.
But like I was actually have a story in here about the Systemd free Debian derivative, Dev1. They're planning a get together this spring. Like there's going to be a Dev1 conference. They call it the I think they call it like the Init System Independence Conference or something like that. So there are still circles. There's Slackware out there, Brent. I mean, there's still those circles that are fully empowered.
When they first started, we laughed at them and said, they're ridiculous. But this is what happens. People laughed at the Mate developers when Mate was first created, and they pointed out, they're just doing a global search and replace on the GNOME 2 code base. But if you get enough enthusiasts who are like-minded and feel passionately about the thing that they're making, then you're going to get conferences arranged around that project. It's inevitable. It's bad on us for laughing and pointing the finger at these people who don't want Systemd on their distros. Fair enough. They've got the choice, and we've given them the tools to make it possible. They're just making use of it.
I think something to keep in mind is the nature of operating systems and computers and technologies are changing so much. Sticking with the car analogy, moving to electric vehicles where the vehicles do not have oil to change anymore.
Right.
But the common thread that we really need to care about is things like telemetry and these connected devices and our privacy. And I think those are things that we need to focus on more so than what are the technical underpinnings that make the thing run.
Yes, that's a fair point. I think that is something that we as a community are particularly good at. And, we are always kind of asking those questions and kind of watching that kind of stuff. It is kind of hard, though, because there's so much of it now. Like, it's just a full spectrum. And maybe I'm just feeling that way because we just got out of Mobile World Congress, but holy smokes. So let's shift gears for a moment, and let's talk about some good old traditional desktop stuff. GNOME 3.32 is just a few weeks away. And the biggest feature we've been waiting for quite a while has landed just recently. Fractional scaling just squeezed in before the big freeze.
Oh, that's right. It's in the Git branches now, nearly 3 years after the bug was first open. And of course, if you're not paying attention or you don't have a high DPI screen, maybe you don't know what fractional scaling is. But I mean, it's really exactly what it sounds like. Having scaling that is a fraction, not just 2, 3, 1, whatever. So you can get just the right scaling for whatever size display you might have.
It's nice to see it. And it was looking like GNOME 3.32, as I should say, would be another cycle without it, which would be another lap for elementary OS. But it looks like it snuck in.
Yeah, it's just nice to see constant improvements, right?
This is GNOME 3.32, is that what you said?
Yes.
So there have been as many GNOME 3 releases now as there were of GNOME 2 releases.
Wow. Soak that in for a moment. Wow, it feels like it's been a long haul to get here. It really does feel like it's been a long haul. Huh. Okay, I just have one more community news story, so let's cover this one pretty quickly because I think this is, from a big picture, pretty important for Canonical. I think Canonical has a good advantage when it comes to Kubernetes deployments, and they have an announcement this week.
That they do. Canonical today announced support for Containerd in the 1.14 release of the Charmed Kubernetes and their Micro K8s distributions, which we talked about previously on Unplugged.
Yeah, and Containerd seems like it gets more and more momentum. Wes, remind me again why Containerd is the hotness.
I mean, really, it's just some simplification to the whole craze that is the container runtime stack. Before you had stuff like, I mean, really, it all started off with Docker, at least in the public's mind recently, right? And Docker did everything. Containerd spun off to have a nice, simple, separate daemon that could just do all the container stuff, right? Handle all the container lifecycle events that you need, push and pull images. Now Docker, you can still use Docker if you know that workflow, but under the hood, it can just talk to Containerd. So it's just kind of simplification and standardization within the industry, really.
Yeah, some much needed simplification, you might say. That's good to know. All right, well then, before we move into the meat of the show, let's do a bit of housekeeping, a few items to cover. Next weekend is Scale. Come say hi to Wes. Popey and I, we're going to be at Scale. Yeah. Very excited about that. We have dinner planned. You can get details for that at meetup.com/Jupiter Broadcasting Saturday, March 9th at PF Chang's. We'll be there stuffing our faces and would love to hang out with you. It looks like we have about 20 people signed up so far. So if you're thinking about going, go sign up so that way we can let PF Chang's know what to expect. And then when you're over at the meetup page, check out the study groups we have coming up. Today after the show, we're doing a study group with Kenny on the fundamentals of Linux, some really cool stuff on there. We recently did a YAML study group. We have virtual Linux Ansible fundamentals coming up, as well as Kubernetes fundamentals just around the corner. We're doing a second study group in March. All of those details up at meetup.com/Jupiter Broadcasting, including that second one is going to be before the Unplugged program. So if the timing hasn't been working out for you, this one might. And then a plug for the 7th birthday of Linux Academy. Congratulations. That's huge.
It's a big day.
Does it feel like it's been 20 years or does it feel like it's been 3?
Approximately 15 is what it feels like. Yeah. Not as bad.
So how did we go from, okay, I'm just curious, like short version, how do we go from, hey, it's our birthday to let's burn Chris's mouth off? How did it go from, hey, we got a birthday to let's make Chris feel all the pain?
I'm happy to say that I had nothing to do with that.
Oh, really?
Outside of course, hosting it.
Yeah.
But that was not my idea.
Yeah, okay. Well, there is a video coming up soon. We did a chili challenge where Anthony asked us trivia questions about the company. And of course, because I'm the new guy, there was small shot. I had a small shot.
Well, you did know how many podcasts are offered.
Yeah, I got that one right.
That was a good one.
And my mouth burned off, and that video will be out soon. Check out the Linux Academy Twitter account for when that gets posted. And we have a whole bunch of live events coming up in April, too. So linuxacademy.com/live if you're listening after the fact or you can remember that long. Meetup.com/Jupiter Broadcasting, though. That's where all the good stuff's going on for Scale. I'm very, very excited about that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, mostly just because Popey's going to be there. Since Popey's going to be there, it's solid now.
Oh, yes. I've just signed up for the meetup. I didn't realize. I thought I'd already done it, but I'd actually signed up for the Linux Fest Northwest one. So I'm now going to two JB meetups. Great.
Super fan.
Yep, that's right. The Linux Fest Northwest one is on there as well. All right, so we also have another meetup we should probably mention. Speaking of Popey, Popey and Wimpy are getting together with their audience for the Ubuntu podcast on March 16th. Gettogether.com, or is it gettogether.community? For that, I'll have a link in the show notes. At the Brewdog, March 16th, 3 p.m.
We've not had one of these before. We asked, we did a tweet out at the end of last year when we finished our last season and asked everyone, hey, what kind of meetup would you like? Would you like to have, hacking session on laptops? Would you like presentations? Or should we go to a pub? And overwhelmingly everyone said, let's go to the pub. So yes, We're doing that.
No way. Surprise.
Yes way, I know. Yeah, who'd have thought it?
English people voted to go to the pub. Shocker.
My meetup advice is make sure the payment stuff is clear up front. Whatever it might be, make sure it is clear up front, right?
I'm editing it right now.
Don't tell anybody this. Don't release this on the internet. But I was somewhere once where I think I watched Anthony get suckered into picking up like a $2,100 meetup tab.
Yeah, Texas Linux Fest.
Yes. And it was my bad because I brought the crowd. Like, we're going to go out to lunch, and it was like, oh, let's go out and do something. And there was quite a crowd that followed us. Plus, we had some of the staff, and it was just...
I just love doing that, though. You know what I mean? Like, it's...
I know. It's good times.
You know, give back to the community.
And plus, there's nothing better than hanging out and just talking Linux and stuff with people. All right, well, let's talk a little Linux. Wes brought a soapbox into the studio about 2 weeks ago.
Just trying to keep it clean, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm usually the one that brings these, you know. Usually it's about online journalism and how it impacts open source communities. That's usually like my favorite one. And it's even got a few trademarks on it now. But Wes really brought this shiner in. It's one that's been in my soapbox closet for so long, and I'd never even thought about talking on the show. I thought maybe I was a crazy person. But have you ever noticed how many damn hidden files are in your home directory? You do a good old-fashioned ls, it's not so bad. Maybe you got a few inner case folders, things like that. But you do an old ls-a, and all the hidden files are revealed. It's a mess of hidden. I encourage the listener, if you are in front of a computer right now, do an old ls-a on your home directory. It is extremely overrun with directories that applications have crapped all over your home folder, not following any particular standard, making a mess out of things. And I've just always thought it was just me being a little precious, you know, thinking that it was my special computer, how dare they mess it up. But I've seen a few articles. And then when Wes walked in the door with this soapbox, I knew I wasn't alone.
Let's see, I'm looking right now. I have 42 directories starting with a dot in front of them, just littered around, and then 27 files totally separate from that.
You're an amateur.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, let's bring it, guys.
I've got 42 directories, like normal directories in my home directory, and 117 hidden. So, yeah.
117? What are you doing over there? You're installing a bunch of software, aren't you?
This is the whole point. They're hidden. I don't care. Like, I don't see them. Like, why should I care?
But they're there. Because they're there. That's like saying you shouldn't wash your hands.
So bed bugs, but I don't care. They're hidden. If I can't see them, they're not there. That's good enough for me.
I'm surprised to hear this from a man of hygiene as yourself.
I agree. Like, just get over yourself. It's unfortunate that there are specifications that you should be adhering to actually, take care of where these dot files get placed. But the world isn't perfect, and therefore there is dot file proliferation. But you can't, out of sight, out of mind, just get over it.
So you're saying there's no validity to the fact that there is an XDG desktop standard that says clearly that developers should put their configurations in the .config folder and go to town in there to keep the user's home directory clean.
Right, and even the XDG specification doesn't say put it in .config. It says use this environment variable declared by your operating system that will put your dot files in the right place as prescribed by that OS. So it's not even like randomly make it in .config, because on other platforms that may not be the right place to put it. That aside, does it matter?
I think what it is it's a result of the Unix and Linux permissions model, where the developers have no other guaranteed place to safely write something that the user will have access to that won't get destroyed on a reboot. And so out of a lack of a better design, they've had to just crap these files everywhere. I think it's a bit of a shame.
I can think of two more reasons why. Like, one, that the application, let's look at Vim, for example, predates the free desktop spec.
Sure.
And so they can say, we're grandfathered in, screw you guys. So Vim is in .vim in my home directory. But what about developers who put stuff in the home directory because that just looks like the right place to put it, and they didn't know about the free desktop spec? Maybe the free desktop spec isn't as well publicized. Maybe it's because we don't have rock solid APIs like Apple do, that people just go free for all. Oh, that'll do, and dump it in your home directory. Like, I'm looking at you, Thunderbird, that's in my home directory.
Yep, it's another one.
Yeah.
Thunderbird doesn't even ship a .desktop file, does it? Or at least Firefox still doesn't.
Really?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
Well, did they start adding one? Because I remember it had to be patched in the Ubuntu archive.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, it was vendor patched, wasn't it? Wasn't this because of the branding debacle, and now that's all gone away?
That does ring a bell. That does ring a bell.
I'm pretty sure they don't carry a .desktop upstream.
Dan, you must agree with me. This is a mess, right? This is a mess. This should be tidy. There should be a platform solution to it, and it should be all in one nice, clean spot that is easy for the user to back up, that doesn't make a mess of the root of the home directory. Please tell me, Dan, you're on my side.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the reason that we need developers to care about this stuff is so that we can provide platform features. But if you're not actually providing those features, there's no real incentive for them to follow the spec. So I don't know. Maybe containers will save us, and we'll force developers to do things more cleanly. I have no idea.
No, the container file system will just be a horrible mess. It'll just be inside the container. Dang. All right. Wes, I tried to represent the soapbox for you as best I could. I'm sorry I failed you.
No, I mean, I think ultimately it doesn't really matter. It's just one of those small inconveniences. And really, I only notice it when I'm trying to teach new users. And it's pretty far down on the list. You know, I kind of just incidentally manage it. And really, if you manage your backups or system at all, you found the few files that you might actually need to care about already.
Okay, now I stood definitely on the I don't care bus as I was traveling down the road, but ding ding, I want to get off. I'm now looking at the things that are in my home directory, and it is now starting to piss me off.
I love it.
Whatever.
I can see a .mumble overlay pipe, a .mumble socket, .pulse dash cookie, .selected underscore editor. What the hell are these things doing in my home directory?
Messing it up. They're messing it up. Disrespecting your home folder. It's the one spot on the system that's truly yours. And I go to great lengths to organize my home folder. It's just very disappointing.
Are there any tools to clean this stuff up?
I found a good one. .lightworks. There can be only one. It's a 0-byte file as well.
Wimpy, don't you have a .file manager that backs these things up, and does it clean these things up too?
Well, potentially it cleans them up if you reinstall your system and then you restore your .files. So yes, I use a bit of software called Yadim, which is yet another .files manager. You can find that at yadim.io. And it's basically a wrapper around Git with a means of expressing these are the .files or .directories that I want to put under version control. And as you move between machines, you can, check out and check in your configuration files so that your, carefully curated configurations follow you everywhere.
That makes it worse. Surely you're like spreading the virus far and wide to every machine.
Well, these files are going to exist whether you like it or not. .gitconfig, .ssh, .bashrc, the list goes on. So I may as well have my versions of those files. I don't get to choose where they get placed, but I can choose what gets placed inside them. So that's why I use a .file manager. And I use it for more than just the .files. Now I actually have, there are common directories you see in your home folder, downloads, music, videos. I have a couple of my own. My favorite being Cruft, and another one called Development, for example. And those are in Yadim. So when I go to a new system I've just installed, I pull down my Yadim config and it stands up all of my common directories and even a folder called Scripts, which is my tool belt of common stuff is in there.
So it makes the folders too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've got a whole heap of stuff in there, all of my useful scripts. So I never have to worry, where's that file that, magically does this thing? It's all, every computer, it's all the same. It's very fast. In fact, I had a disk fail earlier today about lunchtime. And it's no biggie. I mean, I've got good backups, and because I've got these .file things, I'm now up and running. So not going to name names, Popey, looking at you. But, I was able to log into Mumble and move into the on-air channel because all of my Mumble certificates and everything are all in my .file manager. And I was just, back up and running, within 20 minutes.
Yet another .file manager?
Yeah, that one's pretty good. I follow Martin too, except I did mine with Ansible scripts. And all of my configuration, software installations, and everything are done by a Git check-in. And then the script self-installs a cron job that uses Ansible pull to suck the configuration down to each machine that's configured.
Very good.
I don't think we're gonna fix this stuff and make it sane until we have like a free desktop cloud storage portal and like a cloud settings portal, so that users are complaining like, "Hey, GIMP didn't sync my settings to my Nextcloud. Use the settings portal," and then it'll stop littering everywhere.
That'd be a nice service that somebody could offer. Really, that'd be good. That'd be really good. I like having a junk folder in my home directory. I like having a build folder in my home directory and a bin folder. So if I download something that is just like something to execute directly, I always move it to the bin folder. Or if it's something I have to build, I like usually will do the git checkout in the build folder, build it there, and then move it to the bin directory. And then I'll create like a .desktop file for it and actually integrate it into like the Plasma launcher or something like that.
I have a source folder that I use for downloading stuff that I'm compiling from source. Yeah. And then development is my own projects that I have tucked away.
Nice. It's a good setup, you know, and that's why I care. I know I shouldn't care, but that's why I care so much. People have been tweeting me and telegramming me their pictures all week, and it's been really funny to see the different junk in people's folders, and you get an idea of what kind of programs they run. I kind of enjoy looking at it.
You can see those directories, though, you know, downloads, music, in your case, junk, in my case, cruft. But you can't see the dot files, you know, unless you want to turn it on your file manager. And why would you do that to yourself? See dot files every time you open the file manager. You know, you don't see them. What's the big deal?
Yeah, it's not really so much. It's just sort of the principle of it. And every now and then it strikes me. And, you know, I had an opportunity to really think about it when Wes brought that soapbox into the studio. And I was just sitting there looking at that shiny box. And I thought, you know, you're right. That's my home folder, Wes. He likes to get me fired up like that. Wes will go in there and, you know, switch out an editor to Vim, maybe alias Nano to Vim.
You're just so fun to troll. It's not my fault.
I think this is a slippery slope, and next you'll be one of these nutters that is refusing to run a Linux desktop environment if there's any dbus in it, and you'll be compiling out dbus from every application imaginable. I happened across one such blog this week, and I was just looking at it thinking, why would you do this to yourself? Why would you go to these links to remove a useful technology from the Linux desktop?
Were they on Dev 1 by chance?
No, they were not. But, you know, I was just reading it thinking, God, it's a lot of effort to go to. And I'd love to know the rationale as to why you would want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, some people like the challenge.
Is there a desktop environment that doesn't use dbus at all?
I don't think there is. I mean, doesn't XFCE, they use xconf, but I don't know if that's using dbus behind the scenes or not, or if it's their own X settings sort of overlay.
What kind of system can you run without dbus?
Well, I know, right? This is why, you know, sitting there and compiling, removing it from, you know, build options and what have you. It's just crazy to me. It's, you know, modern technology requires a means for inter-process communication.
Yeah, we could have actually used a lot more of that.
I find it curious that throughout this whole blog post, they didn't actually give the rationale for everything you were reading.
No, that's just assumed.
Yeah, no, it was just describing the lengths they'd gone to remove it. It was astonishing.
Did it work at all afterwards? I mean, were they happy with the results?
Well, they had to make a number of compromises in the applications that they were prepared to use because, as Dan points out, there's a whole, you know, catalog of software that is a hard requirement now.
Right.
Including like network manager and
even like system level stuff like DNS mask wants to use dbus by default now.
Whew. You know, as our buddy Richard says,
I think it's wasted effort.
I think that is some wasted effort there, my friends. All right, well, I'm glad Anthony's here for this story. This is our last story of the day before we get to the picks. And I'd love to get your perspective on this one. So Lyft is doing an IPO. And as part of that, it has come out that they are paying Amazon at a minimum of $8 million a month until the end of 2021. It's all buried in there. They're contractually obligated to pay at least $300 million to Amazon Web Services. They're committed to spending between $8.33 million and $8.57 million a month to AWS.
Really what struck me is that, I mean, they're committed to this, right? If they don't hit or exceed that 300 million threshold, well, they're going to have to pay the difference.
Yeah.
Is it based on a commitment or is it based on something like reserved instances or something silly like that?
Yeah, it's like a price deal they got.
Yeah, so what's happening, and we got to experience this with one of them as well. So what they're doing is they're locking in these contracts, and they're contractually obligated to hit a certain amount of revenue as part of the contract. Now, there's things that they do in return. Sometimes they're partnerships. Sometimes it's just access to stuff. But or they'll come in and help you with their infrastructure. It depends on what you negotiate with the cloud provider, but it's contractually obligated to hit it.
This is really remarkable because the information recently reported that several companies have found that their AWS bills are getting surprisingly high. Dropbox notably recently switched off AWS to their own on-premises infrastructure due to monthly run costs. There was another startup that announced that they were also contractually obligated to make a certain payment level, like they would have a certain level of usage. And it strikes me, well, I guess the first thing that strikes me about this is what an intense amount of money to use what is essentially hosted free software at the core of it. Like, what a striking amount of money. That is really, really something. Per month, $300 million is what they have to pay total, which works out to be almost $9 million a month.
It's good to be AWS, huh?
I mean, there's companies that don't even get close to making that much money in an entire year.
Yeah, but it's not unfeasible, though. Think of Lyft, at least Uber is, but Lyft's a global company.
Right.
Okay, they got to run at scale. They got to run it high available. You mean you don't want your Lyft application going down,
right? Especially when you're driving somebody.
Yeah, just to manage all the servers and application and development, all that. The salary alone to run all of that in house and all the infrastructure and everything starts getting up there to be expensive. Versus AWS, where you can offload a lot of that. You still have a lot of control, but you don't have to own the hardware, worry about the scaling, and you can do it quicker. So sometimes for that convenience and that kind of safety net, it's what you're paying for. It's almost a little security versus...
Right, and it's the core of their business. It's like what they do is that they're a service. They have to be online.
Oh, yeah. Well, and they got to be able to scale, too. And, I mean, you got to be able to scale up and scale down. And I mean, I guess at the end of the day, this is one of my favorite questions. Are they a hardware company? Are they an engineering? What do they specialize in? And then offload the stuff that you don't specialize in to somebody who does. Even if it costs a little bit of a premium, you need to stay focused on your core business. So it sounds like they're doing that. But I'll tell you what, I feel a lot better about our cloud bills now. This is good news.
Yeah. Well, that's what gives you an idea of where they could go, though.
Yeah.
Here's another way to look at it. Like, even when you're not the size of a Lyft. So I'm going to speak from experience here. At my last company, when I started, we had 11 IT people. We could barely keep up with the engineers. We shifted everything into Amazon. Our staffing cut down to 4 people. We still kept up, and we were saving about $700,000 a year based on salaries, benefits, and everything like that.
Sure.
Well, if it wasn't for the cloud, we wouldn't be here today. We couldn't offer. When Linux Academy started, I had nothing. Like, I had dollars to my name. Wouldn't be able to do anything if it wasn't for the ability that you pay for what you use. I mean, if you would have had to pre-provision co-location space or hardware, dedicated hosting or something like that, it's too expensive.
Were the first systems on a dedicated box?
Mm-mm.
No.
It was all AWS when we first started.
Wow.
Now we're across lots of different stuff.
Yeah,
It was all AWS.
Yeah.
If your bills are getting expensive, it's because you're not managing your costs, because there's always going to be that discussion and evaluation of what your business requirements are. And if you have to accomplish X, you're going to have a cost. And if you're outside of your budget, it's because you're not watching it, or there's been a variable change in your business. And it's an evaluation. It's constantly changing. You constantly have to evaluate it. And if you need to stick to that hardcore budget, well, then you need to make some decisions on what you're going to cut to stay there.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And in a past role, we actually took a decision that it was cheaper to re-architect the application that we were deploying to use microservices and stay on AWS and manage our AWS instances better than it was to bring everything in-house, so to speak, and stick it on our own metal and continue operating our application in the way it was currently architected. So you do have to think creatively when you use Amazon or AWS rather, and it's not a replacement for I have a big server in the corner and now I want a big server in the cloud. That is not what these cloud providers are designed to offer at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole different scenario. Like, I even had a VDI deployment where our hardware aged out. And the cost of replacing that hardware alone, we would have paid it off using the cloud in about 4.5 years. By that time, you're almost ready for a hardware refresh again. It was a break even, but then you get all the management capabilities that you're not even breaking a sweat.
Right. Yeah.
I remember this story a few years ago. It came out, and I just looked it up again, and it turns out it's now a case study on AWS website, but it's from Zynga, or however they pronounce it, Zynga, the gaming company.
Zynga, I think.
Zynga, yeah. And so what they did was when they, Farmville or whatever on Facebook was huge, and they ended up thinking, hey, it's going to be cheaper for us to just host our own data center. And so they started on AWS and they moved it onto their own data center. And there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened. The technology change that they had to do, the popularity of their games went down, and they had this complete overall cost commitment. Now, this kind of goes back to the article, though. If they would have had a contract like this, would they still have the cost commitment? Does Lyft have that cost commitment, or is there something in the contract that says, hey, maybe if the business starts going south? Because if you start removing the benefits of scaling up and down and paying for what you need and being tied into obligations, that's when it's potentially you start losing some of the advantages of the cloud.
I think what's, to me, very clear is, for a very, very long time now, and this really bears it out, the actual cost of the core software itself is a very minor factor in enterprise deployments. And so the way we're seeing that bear out here is the fact that AWS is often implementing open source software and then providing that as a service. The fact that the very similar functionality is available for completely free, and that's not acting as sort of a backstop to these costs. The costs seem to be independent of the fact that they're all based on software that's absolutely free. Like, that does not seem to be impacting the cost of AWS at all.
All AWS is doing in these cloud providers is they're taking something that exists and they're putting their wrappers around it.
Right.
Postgres, MariaDB.
Right.
They're just wrapping RDS around it and writing some code to manage it on their end.
I think it really underscores, like, the cost of software isn't a huge deciding factor for businesses, because otherwise they'd be using the free stuff, right? It's everything else. It's the staffing, it's the implementation, it's the maintenance, it's the future-proofing, it's the scaling, it's so many other things that go into it.
Right. Cost might be a factor, right? It's one of those, but you can't ignore that. So you might not go with the premium Oracle database because Postgres is free, but yes, you still have to pay to keep the thing online and do your backups.
One of the big commercial avenues for Ubuntu is Bootstack, which is where we manage and operate clouds on behalf of organizations. So, it's all the same open source stuff that, everyone's familiar with. But, they want professionals to just look after that. As Anthony said earlier, if IT is not your core business mission, then, why would you do that? Pay somebody else to look after that bit for you, so you can get on with the business of actually running your operation.
Yeah, you gotta focus, right? You gotta choose only a few things to focus on as a company, because if you gotta focus on and be experts in a lot of different things, that's a staffing nightmare, that's an expertise nightmare, that's an institutional knowledge nightmare. It's a risk.
Yeah, it's something to see it, though, just to see it in hard numbers. You get glimpses because this stuff is usually all private, like how much people are paying and stuff. But when you file an IPO, these things come out. And so now we're seeing it. Now, when Uber goes for their IPO, we'll get an idea of what they're spending on this infrastructure cost, too, I would imagine. $300 million by 2022, though. That's significant.
I'm really curious what that lock-in details.
The Business Insider article says that Lyft still has to pay it even if they don't reach that usage level. But you never know. Like, there could be something else in the contract that says, hey, if we go completely bottoms up, this is over. Like, who knows, right? And what did they get in exchange?
Because when you look at the traditional model, it's simply like the only way they lock you in on anything as far as a duration is reserved instances. That's your largest cost savings. That's your contractual obligation. Outside of that, it's consume what you use and pay for that.
So speaking from experience, what I can say is they try to entice you with some stuff like, you can have access to some of our in-house developers to help you solve some of your big technical challenges, and you get priority attention, and you get access into product managers, and they help, those are the type of deals that actually help influence the feature roadmap inside of services.
Yeah, where you're a big enough customer that they come to you and say, hey, you've showed up on our radar. Let's talk.
Or if the customer goes and says, hey, we have this problem, we need this, they will prioritize it in terms of development for them internally.
It's not even size driven, though. So I work for an MSP. We resell a managed Amazon service. So we manage Amazon for customers because they don't even want to do that. Amazon, for the smallest deals, throws us a huge amount of credits to hand off to the customer. Like, I have a new customer that's 3 servers. They just issued me a $5,000 credit US for no reason other than to entice them to come in, because they know full well that once you're in there, you're going to spend. And that's just all there is to it. So they will go over backwards with architecture help. That you get access to product managers. Like you can walk into their office and sit down and meet with them. They just want to get you hooked in, because they know you will spend. Simple.
It's almost like the entire Amazon business model. Go in for market share, get them on there first, worry about profits later. But AWS is exceptionally profitable, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Well, market leader, they're just there first, right? It's like anyone who gets there first, you have an advantage.
Yeah, and it's everybody else's game now to catch up. So I think still there's something about it though that strikes me. Just to conclude our thoughts, just something about it strikes me that you could build something similar with free software yourself. Like it's a very interesting time where something very similar is achievable on your own if you have the right time, the resources, and the reasons. Or you can go flip a switch and have it on this like almost what seems like infinite scale. But it's the same essential free software underneath it all.
Don't reinvent the wheel. Spend time inventing something new.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's occasions when, depending on what you're working on, the focus of the business, you can't use the public cloud. You may be the custodians of data that you simply don't have the agreement to put somewhere in a public instance. And one of the companies I worked for in the past, we created our own data center, effectively our own cloud, and we operated it because the customers that we were servicing, they all had sensitive data, and there was no way we would be successful as a business if we were using public cloud infrastructure. So, we had to build our own.
Right. There's stuff like VoIP comes to mind, or the things where you have latency guarantees that you have to make.
Yeah, there's all, I'm not gonna mention the nature of the business, but yeah, there's there's a different strata of organizations where you simply cannot, put it in the public cloud.
The other thing that strikes me is it's harder sometimes to build those private clouds these days because because people are using so much cloud infrastructure. Unless you're giant and can pay top dollar, those people go to build the public clouds and they're not going to build yours.
But even look at what Amazon's doing with Outposts, if you're familiar with it. It's basically Amazon in a box in your data center that they fully manage from the same console using the same APIs.
When the cloud first came out, I was sitting here thinking, like, it really, I don't know why it popped in my head, but I'm sure it's popped in everybody's head. They're just going to get rid of everybody's job, right? And then, if it's just spin stuff up, you don't have to worry about stuff. And then every year that goes by, I would actually argue to say that architectures these days are more complicated than they were 10 years because of the cloud. You have 100 and some different AWS services, an infinite number of combination of things, awesome architectures like event-driven architectures that you're empowered to do. And now you can specialize in a specific component of expertise.
Yeah.
And just that in the cloud.
Yeah, you're right. It really it's a continuing expansion. Like we were talking on Linux Action News this week about these little microcontroller devices for like valves and whatnot that are now getting connected to AWS and getting managed by AWS. Like it's really everything. Not for everybody. Like Wimpy just very much pointed out very clearly. Like there are still plenty of use cases, but and you're right. It's getting even more complex now. And it gets even crazier when you start going multi-cloud or you have some on-premises, some on cloud. Like it can be really complicated now.
Well, Chris, if you were ever going to start a high-speed frequency trading software company, you would for sure have to have your own on-premises environment. I do know that.
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
The speed matters.
That makes sense. Or what about Bitcoin? No, probably not Bitcoin.
No, not Bitcoin.
No, not Bitcoin.
You can spin up all the GPUs.
Well, before we get out of here, why don't we do a couple of app picks? I promised you at the top of the show that we would give you not one, but two different potential video editors for the Linux desktop this week. Both have brand new versions that came out just this week. First off, the only Flowblade describes itself as fast, precise, and stable. It's a GPL3 licensed video editor based on the MLT framework, which just got a brand new update. And one of the big things in here is composite, mix, filter, and animate. My review of this is it's still in early days, but it's getting better. When I mentioned that in the pre-show, Mr. Wimpers jumped in with Shotcut.
Yeah, I'm deeply, deeply in love with Shotcut. I'm by no means a well-versed video editor, but I did some research the middle of last year to choose a video editor that I was going to learn and and use for projects in the future. And Shotcut came out as my preferred choice. And the guys behind Shotcut, and this is Dan Denedy, he's got a long history in the sort of video post-processing and video editing industry, and is also the guy behind MLT itself. So Shotcut is kind of like the reference implementation of what Melt can do on the back end. And there's lots of killer features, but the things that have really started to stand out in recent months in Shotcut is the keyframe support. You can now have multi-point keyframes, so you can move effects and transitions through multiple curves. Color grading is excellent. And the thing that I really love is first class encode your video, render your video out on the GPU, which for listeners at home, you only want to do on NVIDIA GPUs because the quality on AMD is particularly bad. It's quite bad on Intel. On 10 series NVIDIA cards, it's acceptable, and on 20 series NVIDIA cards, it's excellent.
Good to know.
And conveniently, snap install Shotcut. You'll always have the latest version.
Oh, I love it. Also, the new version not only updates to a new version of Qt, but it's got some feature in here. A new feature added. English Great Britain translation. I don't know what that would be. That's strange.
Yeah, it's excellent now that we have the text appearing in the application in traditional English rather than simplified English.
Well, thank you for the pick. Shotcut and Flowblade, we will have links in the show notes, linuxunplugged.com/episode number, which insert episode number here, which is 291, or the links will be in your mobile podcast player. Guys, good luck. I think we have one more week or two before the meetup, but good luck with your Ubuntu meetup. And Popey, looking forward to seeing you at scale, sir.
Oh, yes. I cannot wait.
Yeah, it's going to be good times. All right. With that, we will begin to wrap it up. Go follow Anthony on Twitter, Anthony D. James. I'm at Chris LAS. Go follow Wes at Wes Payne. Go check out Wes on the TechSnap program, techsnap.systems. I was hanging out with Jim Salter this week talking about proper passwords, right? Is that what it was?
Oh, yeah. How to do proper password storage. Not plain text. Never plain text.
No, it was a really good episode. It was a good take on a topic that we've heard before. I really liked it. A lot of good information in there. Hey, coming up in just a little bit, if you're listening live, is the study group. But if you missed it, there may be a YouTube channel. In the meantime, come back here next Tuesday! The Unplugged program. All right, let's do a little post show and get out of here. Do our titles. We didn't have the votes going this week, so we got to figure out what the heck we're going to title this thing.
Brent's doing some great work in the doc with some titles. Maybe you should read those out here. Propose them, Brent.
Oh, really? Good job, Brent. See, you're going to win this one.
Well, I'm not up against very many people here, so although some of the best, I must say.
That's true. What do you like the best, though? Is there one of them you like?
Lifting the clouds.
Got lifting the clouds, flipping the switch on FOSS, dot or dash. I like that one. And clouding out open source.
Clouding out, like crowding out, like that kind of thing. Like crowding.
Let it be what you want.
Yeah.
$8 million a month in AWS.
What? Really? Oh! I thought you meant that was. I was like, no way is that. I thought you said that. I thought you said
you think that was our bill?
Yes. No. No way. I was gonna say.
Isn't that what it was from Lyft in 8 million?
Yeah, it was 8.9 million a month, I think. All right, so dot or dash, clouding out open source, lifting the clouds, flipping the switch on FOSS. What about flipping the switch? What was that about? That was about ease of use.
You mentioned it for you can just turn the switch on a server now and concentrate on something more interesting. But if you had to ask, maybe it means it's not right.
All right. Well, that's horrible then. That's horrible. What are you guys doing for the rest of the evening? Assuming you're not listening to the study group. Nobody's going to tell me what they're doing tonight?
Yeah, my wife just came in to give me my daughter's passport. Yeah, sorry.
Good. Keep that handy.
I'm building up a packing list for scale, making sure I'm bringing along everything I need to bring along, because otherwise I'll forget. I'm terrible. My memory's awful.
What's the most important thing on there?
I can't say. It's a surprise.
Oh. Oh. I bet it's for the Bad Vulture thing.
Yeah, loads of stuff. Just in case, like, because when you run a stand at an event, you've got to have like everything just in case, all the extra bits and bobs, USB keys and like a Raspberry Pi and like SD cards and like HDMI cables and USB chargers and all that crap.
Always feel better with a pie in your pocket.
Yes.
Hadia got pulled over by TSA for traveling with my microphone.
Really?
This happens a few times, yeah. I meant to take the bag with me, but just the way it worked out. I guess it looks like a pipe bomb.
Oh, I've had that. When I was flying to the States once, they said he unpacked the check at the gate just before I got on the plane. He emptied out my laptop bag and I had my Zoom microphone in there. And he said, "What's this?" I said, "It's a microphone." And he said, "What's that for?" And I said, "Interviewing people." And he goes, "Are you a journalist?" And I was like, "No." He goes, "Oh, because if you were a journalist, you wouldn't be allowed into the States on like the visa you've got." And I was like, "What?
Wow.
No, I'm not." So I was like, "Ah, shit."
That's crazy.
I always get stopped both for the microphone and then a bag full of just photo gear that seems like no one would ever carry that much. And then a glass jar full of oatmeal. They always give me a strange look for that one.
A glass jar full of oatmeal, Brent. I love you. You're so great.
Yeah. What kind of glass jar?
Like a mason jar, I'm picturing.
It's got to be a mason jar.
With a metal lid, though?
Does it have a handle?
No handle. It takes up too much room.
Of course.
But you get hot water on the plane and throw some chocolate in there. You're all good.
Oh my goodness!
Clever.
This is a travel hack we're getting. So you're getting the advantages of a dry, packable meal that you can then get hot water on the plane. You add, and it becomes, and you are also packing chocolates. This is huge, Brent. This is
you can
mind
add nuts
blown.
if you'd like.
I am
You can.
totally doing this on Wednesday.
Why not just have a granola bar?
Oh, because it's hot and comfy, and the look on their face when they see a glass jar full of who knows what is priceless.
Yeah.
Is that not considered? I guess oatmeal's. I guess it's. It makes sense. It's not like it's made oatmeal when you're going through TSA.
Right. It's not like liquid, right?
Yeah.
So, but I could see them thinking it's pretty weird.
How far can you push the boundaries on taking stuff that is not liquid but very clearly is made much better with hot water on the plane? How far can you go?
Popey, you do know that we have food in the States. You can just eat here. You don't have to pack the food.
Well, yeah. So that's a big thing, all your filthy chlorine wash chicken and like beef pumped full of barbiturates and stuff. I don't know if I can eat that. I've got to bring some oats. That's what I've got to do.
Now, wasn't that just a fantastic episode?
Brisket. I'm making meats now. Someone asked me, do I smoke meats? That's gonna be delicious. Yeah, if I smoke meat, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Give me the sock, give me the sock. C-U-C-C sock. Say my name, baby. Give me the sock, give me the sock. C-U-C-C sock. Smoking meats, hello to you. Thanks for hanging out with me in my backyard while I'm smoking these meats too. The thing about smoking meat is it takes a long time sitting around with my Wi-Fi. I like racing. Grilling meats, racing cars are two of the most fun things that you can do. Manual transmission, I enjoy that. Do I hunt? Yes.
Hello, chat room. Thank you for joining us. We are getting ready for the study group. It's going to be great. You can join us in the Mumble Room. We'll have the classroom going if you would like to ask questions. We'll be covering some of the fundamentals of Linux, some basics, some history, all of that. It's all getting going here in just a little bit. So join us soon.
We are smoking these meats, meat like a brisket. I'm making meats now. Someone asked me, do I smoke meat? That's gonna be delicious. Yeah, if I smoke meat, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Give me the zuck, give me the zuck. C-U-C-C, zuck. Say my name, baby, give me the zuck, give me the zuck. C-U-C-C, zuck. Smoking meat, you smoke lemon chicken, smoke salmon, you'll love it. Bison sirloin, ribs and sausage. We got some more pork ribs. We got a brisket. Yeah, that's right. You don't want to miss it. We have just applied the sweet baby rays. I want my baby back ribs. You know, it's a weekend, man. Break out the purple shirt. While I was smoking meats earlier in the day, I started a triathlon. Swam about a mile. It's a long way. Biked about 20 miles. And then I had to go deal with something. So I had to abort. Smoking these meats.
Signor Zuckerberg. Signor Zuckerberg. Mr. Zuckerberg.
Oh no. Once again, thoughts of smoked meats have caused me to drift into a land of imagination.
If you're listening live, irc.geekshed.net, pound Jupiter Broadcasting will be following there too. Although the Mumble Room's the preferred spot in the classroom area, we'll be watching the IRC too. irc.geekshed.net, pound, hashtag Jupiter Broadcasting!
We're smoking these meats, meat like a brisket. I'm making meats now. Someone asked me, do I smoke meat? That's gonna be delicious. Yeah, if I smoke meat, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, smoking these meats, meat like a brisket. I'm making meats now. Someone asked me, do I smoke meat? That's gonna be delicious. Yeah, if I smoke meat, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Give me the zuck, give me the zuck. You suck. Say my name, baby. Give me the zuck, give me the zuck. C-U-C-C, zuck. Smoking meats, baby. Give me the zuck, give me the zuck. C-U-C-C, zuck. Say my name, baby. Give me the zuck, give me the zuck. C-U-C-C, zuck. Smoking meats, baby.
Welcome to BSD Unplugged, your weekly BSD talk show that's too busy getting actual work done to care about your silly display server. My name is Alan.
I don't know if I hear a similarity. Chat room says they hear a similarity there. I don't know if I hear it. I don't hear it, I don't think.
They both have a certain, how do you say, emotionlessness?
Oh, a robot quality, you may say? Right, I suppose so. Oh my gosh, maybe we're onto something. Hello, Mr. Payne, how are you doing?
Doing splendid, man. We got that Slick Linux Unplugged episode out, and we just got to listen for a change.
Yeah, that is nice. I heard it was a fun Coda Radio too. I haven't had a chance to listen to this week's episode of Coda Radio, but
I mean, Coda Radio is always fun. You never know what'll happen. And really, what you don't know is what piece of hardware might have broken this week.
I have to listen to find out. So I believe is the study group starting at the top of the hour.
Top of the hour, 4 p.m. PST.
So it gives you plenty of time to get Mumble installed if you want, but I encourage you to hang out with Wes and I. And you know, we could invite folks up to the classroom and have people start joining us in the classroom on the Mumble Room.
Right. We should probably just move on over there.
Yeah. Why don't you move over there? If you're in the on-air room or if you're on there, come on over to the classroom. Let's hang out in the classroom, and we could start talking some stories. There was one I grabbed from the 28th of last month that I just thought was one of these stories that I know in my core to be true. You know, there's these things out there that you have all kinds of data. You have scientific data, you have observational data, and then you have that gut feeling. Not a valid data point, but it's one that we all kind of, from time to time, have used to make a pretty big decision. And I have learned to kind of try to temper my gut data point with real data points. And you got to be careful. You got to be careful with that kind of thing. But I have so far not really saw any solid data about this thing I'm about to talk about. I know I'm really building up to it, but I have felt deeply about this as a fundamental problem of humanity. I know I'm really building this up, but I'll get there. Give me a second here. Think about this for a moment. Everything is getting infinitely more complex. When you look at even a basic dongle, I have right here in my hand, I have a USB-C And it's got this big, thick piece of white plastic on it. And if you break that open, inside is 2 different ARM processors, 2 different ARM CPUs in one dongle. And one of those is actually running a tiny little operating system that its sole purpose is to interface with the USB system, take the data from that, and then transcode that data and send it to the HDMI system. This little operating system that runs on one of the 2 ARM CPUs in a dongle that is the size, actually it's smaller than the size of my thumb, my entire thumb, like the finger thumb. It's smaller than that entire appendage that monkeys would kill for.
We live in a complicated world. It's kind of a shame. I mean, and then it just keeps getting worse. You have to pay attention, otherwise, it seems like same like when like Thunderbolt first came around. I didn't have any devices that would run it, and I was just like, what is this technology? It's like magic.
Yeah, it's true. So you think about it. You think about how there could be an entire operating system in a dongle now, right, with multiple CPU cores. And you think about how that just the complexity of it is astounding. It's getting to the point now where I don't think we can properly, fully conceive of it. Like you have to have people that are really they're ARM experts, they're ARM architecture experts, and then you have people that are real-time operating system experts, and you have people that are transcoding experts, and then you have hardware design experts, and then you have hardware manufacturing experts, and they all work together to create a product. But not any one of them in that company that had made this dongle could actually make the entire product on its own. And that's really weird if you think about it. And so much of our society is like that now with technology. And I know that we cannot cope with this. We just simply, in my gut data point that I was talking about earlier, it tells me we do not have the means to cope with this. It's beyond our hairless monkey brains to cope with this problem. And on the 28th of last month, the sons of bitches at Bloomberg really got me freaked out. When you think of hip, modern places, I often think of like Silicon Valley, the West Coast, and San Francisco. Well, in San Francisco, the state still prices real estate like it's the 1980s, at least in the assessor's office, which everybody has to go through. Its property tax system dates back to the dawn of the floppy disk. City employees praising the market work with software that runs on dead programming languages and can't be used with a mouse. Ancestors are prone to make mistakes when using the vintage software because it can't display all the basic information for a given property on one screen. The staffers have often opened and exited several menus to input simple information such as an address. To put it mildly, the setup, quote, doesn't reflect the business needs now. At least that's according to the assessor for the city of San Francisco. Of course, what does that son of a bitch know? San Francisco rarely conjures images of creaky, decades-old technology, but that's what's running a key swath of its government, as well as many cities across the United States. U.S. politicians can often score relatively easy wins with constituents by borrowing money to pay for new roads and bridges, but the digital equivalents of such infrastructure projects generally enthusiasm. Quote, modernizing technology is not a top issue that typically comes to mind when you talk to taxpayers and constituents on the street. And isn't that so true for every business out there? That's not just a government problem.
No, I mean, we're just bad at thinking long term, right? We're reactionary. We can imagine maybe the next couple of hours, the next day, maybe the next month if you're really proactive, but we don't.
Yeah.
We're obviously bad at maintenance in our personal lives and in our business lives. And if you don't proactively try to build that in and force yourself to do it, it's just not going to happen.
Right. I mean, it reminds me of that. Remember that Sony hack that they blamed on North Korea?
Yes.
And then like I can't remember exactly how, but like insurance information came out and meeting notes were leaked We even covered it on TextNet back in the day. And they in there split the issue of their out-of-date infrastructure. Like they realized that was a legitimate problem that they need to address. And they weighed that against the likely risk of getting hacked and the fact that they have insurance, and they determined from a business standpoint it was a better idea to run out-of-date software and not patch it and take the risk because, after all, they have insurance, and the risk is maybe like, it's almost hard to even say, what is it? We'll put a number on it. There's a 30% risk they'll get hacked. Who knows what it is, right? I mean, for them, it was 100%. But let's just say in their evaluation, they determined a 30% chance we'll get hacked. But there is a 100% chance upgrading their entire infrastructure will take a whole shit ton of time and cost a bunch of money they don't have time or money for, right? So it's like they're weighing a 100% certainty bad thing against a maybe bad thing.
Yeah.
And they choose to bet on the maybe bad thing.
Yeah, and I mean, right? How do you advertise? We kept doing the infrastructure upgrades that you assume we did because you pay us all the time. That's not sexy.
I came into a school district not too long ago. I mean, it is kind of a long time now, but it is relatively not too long ago, and they still had a DOS box running with a big old you remember ISA cards before PCI? You had ISA.
Of course.
Did you ever have?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they had an old ISA, which was a 16-bit slot. They had a big old 16-bit ISA card.
How many bits do you need, Chris?
Yeah, I know, right? Should be enough. And that had 4 modems built into it. And that was then tied into the teacher's attendance little thing that they would fill out. And it would feed into this system. And whoever was marked as missing would automatically get called by this DOS bot system. They didn't call it a bot back then, but that's basically what it was. And it would call out to parents 4 lines at a time. And they just simply didn't find anything on Windows or any other operating system that worked with the system they had and could work with an old modem that they had that could call on so many lines at once. And so they just, for 15 years, kept using this whole DOS app. And I can't blame them.
I mean, there is always, if it's not broken, well, don't fix it.
Yeah.
It's a hard. How do you reconcile that, right? In our modern age of security and updates, there's a fine line that you want to walk because you don't want to make changes for no reason, but you also have to stay up with the times.
Yeah. I'm reading Slack. It's hard to read Slack on the air and the same time.
I think the part that
sounds like people are being shitheads up in the main lobby and mumble, which is going to put off students, and that's not good. That's not good.
Keep it cool, everybody. We're all friends here.
Yeah. Oh, good. They've moved out of the lobby. Okay, well then, problem solved. Hello, Elle. Wait, hold on, Elle. Don't say anything. I think the mumble room's muted. Hello, Elle.
Hello.
Hi. How are you doing?
I'm so excited that my mic works.
I was about to go up there and start yelling at people, but it looks like it's been sorted.
All right, I'm a horrible person. I'm not kidding. I went and made popcorn and was just sitting there listening.
Yeah, I mean, you get yeah. You never know. I often assume people in there are drinking. That's what I assume.
I mean, you've made a comfortable home because people just make themselves at home in this mumble area, huh?
That is very, very true. It is very true. That's why we have on-air rooms specifically. Anyways, so have you ever been anywhere, Elle, where you've bumped into a super, super old system? This hasn't happened to me for a while now, but there was a good period of time where I'd walk in and they'd be around at the screen, or for a long time, I'm really dating myself here, but for a very, very, very long time, you could walk into a Bank of America and they had old Mac Pluses, which were these all-in-one little black and white Mac terminals that would just be terminaled back into their mainframe. Have you ever been out somewhere in the modern world and come across just a completely ancient tech setup?
So at my kid's school, I think I heard you mention that earlier. Yeah, the computers that are used in the main lobby, I think are older than I am. I mean, these things you turn on the monitor and it's got a box that it's sitting on and it powers on the whole thing. So I don't even know how it's still running. Like the color isn't, it's like a green on the screen because, you know, I just don't think that it even has all the pixels that it needs anymore.
You know what I had, which was inspired by my dad's setup, is on my monitor stand was a surge protector that had physical push buttons on the front that I would then label. So like the main PC had a button, then the monitor, the printer, the surge protector that turned on all my devices, like a punk, punk, punk. So I'd have like 5 buttons I'd had to press before my PC would fully power up. It was really old school. Looking back at it now, it's ridiculous because I don't even turn my systems off now. I just leave them running 24/7. They sleep maybe, but yeah.
We used to play the game when I was an admin about finding the box that's had the longest time since reboot in 6 years without rebooting was the one that we found. And it was running Red Hat 4, I believe.
Ooh,
very nice.
What was that thing doing?
Okay, it was actually running an application for a multi-billion-dollar company. And they could not figure out how to move it onto a newer platform because it was using, I think it was like PHP modules that they couldn't update. And so instead of rewriting the application, they were just hoping for the best.
Yeah, sure. What could go wrong? Nothing.
The great thing is that they just kept throwing money at the issue, so we kept supporting it. It was ridiculous when you know, I came in at Red Hat 6, so I didn't even know what I was doing.
Oh, wow. Red Hat 6. It's good old times. Good old times. All right, I got a question for you guys. And Wes or Al or anybody in the mumble room, feel free to chime in with this one, okay? So I've been noticing a story going around for like the last 3 or 4 days, and it just got posted to our Linux yesterday. And you may have seen it. It's on Twitter a lot. The general like takeaway headline is Dell laptop BIOS update improves Linux support, kind of. And if you look at it, it's one of the enhancements to this BIOS update, which is really a UEFI update. But one of the enhancements to this BIOS update is it improves compatibility with the Linux operating system for Inspiron 15, 17, 55, 75, and 57, 75 systems. But if you read the website from Dell, it's only available as an executable that you then have to download and run in a Windows box, right? So, look at Dell. They're trying to support Linux users, but they're so fucking stupid that they don't know that they have to release it as a Linux binary. Dell's so dumb. They released an executable for Linux. Oh, Dell's so dumb. And that's essentially been the internet's take on it. Which is so... First of all, it's like, isn't it? First of all, can't we just be happy that Dell is releasing a firmware update for Linux? Can't we just be thankful? And second of all, what the really frustrating thing about this story is, this update is being delivered via, and you probably were thinking this, LVFS, which is the Linux Vendor Firmware Service, which delivers firmware updates through traditional software update channels on Linux. So that way it just looks like one of your traditional updates. GNOME Software is a great example. It has great support for this. If you install like Fedora and you have a system that has a firmware update, it'll just be listed in the GNOME Software Update Center as an update that needs to be done. Just did this to my T480 yesterday. Actually, this morning. No, yesterday. I don't know. Who knows? And that is the same story with this Dell BIOS update. But all of these dumb, well, I shouldn't say that, but all of these armchair commentators on our Linux and on Twitter, which is really where it first showed up on my radar, are just, they're taking, as our friends from the UK would say, they're taking the piss out of Dell over this. When Dell is actually delivering this in one of the best ways possible to Linux users. Like, they're doing it the native Linux way. They're doing it the way we want them to do it, but simply don't know. They don't know that Dell is distributing updates through LVFS because the people that I'm talking about don't listen to our shows. Like, the people that listen to our shows, they know. But the people that don't listen to our shows, they don't know.
I mean, it seems like there's some problems with branding, maybe. you got the update and you know, but like calling it the Linux way, it's the new Linux way. I don't know. It's a confusing area, right? Because, I mean, even on the Windows side, it's not like how many Windows users actually do those firmware updates. The whole space is confusing. So I can see, ideally, especially for a company that's trying to support Linux better, which we should all be grateful. You're totally right about that. It would be nice. In an ideal world, this could have been done better, but it's already done poorly for Windows.
Don't you feel, though, like, I guess what has me concerned is it feels like, if you'll excuse the term, a messaging problem. Like, we have this first class, as good as any top-tier PC vendor or Apple delivering firmware updates for your laptop, which is a huge milestone for Linux, because traditionally you've had to like have free DOS, or you've had to come up with some way to update your BIOS, and you've always felt like a second-class citizen. And now they're doing a first-class solution for Linux users, but the Linux users don't even know about it. Like, we've failed to message appropriately to them. Even though Richard Hughes does blog posts, it's on Gnome Planet, we cover it in all of our shows, there's still a huge section of users out there that are completely unaware of a great feature that Linux has, and I bet you that's not the only one they're unaware of.
It seems like, so what's the role that the OEMs should play here, right? Because, you know, Richard Hughes, LVFS can do it, but shouldn't Dell or HP or whoever be like, hey, awesome customer who bought our laptop and is using it, we've taken the steps to support Linux and we're using this great service. We just wanted to let you know about that. Here's all your updates. You can get them on the site, or just do it the easy Linux way.
Yeah. Yeah, customer, because it's their customer.
Because there is no Linux. And it might be different for System 76, but that, unfortunately, in this area is a whole area we shouldn't go into. But otherwise, like, what is Linux, right? It's not the distro's job necessarily. It's not the window manager's job.
Right.
Gotta be
and there's
hardware.
no Linux marketing department.
Exactly. Now, maybe in a world where the Linux Foundation cared about desktop Linux at all, they could do that. You know, they could maybe reach out and play that role, and possibly they talk about it on the server. But on the server, you already have hardware engineers who probably do listen to our shows, or at least already know about how to update their BIOS.
I think you touched on it there for a second. I'd love it to be vendor neutral. I know that's impossible. That's just impossible. But I would just love for this to be. I would love messaging and communicating to end Linux users about the great things that desktop Linux can do. In fact, if you look at all of the capabilities that we've gained over the last year, so few end users are actually taking advantage of the systemd nspawn, for example. And even just application developers, or the way people are architecting things on Linux, they're not taking advantage of some of the new stuff that we've developed. And it really feels to me a bit like an education issue. And there's only so much that podcasts can do, I suppose. I do kind of feel like that's a role we fill, but obviously we can't get the whole world to listen to us.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because there's almost a general consumer thing too. Like you first have to even know that like firmware updates are part of owning a computer. Yeah,
right. Fair point.
We don't hand out manuals, right? Like you might not even get that with the car. I mean, you get one, but you might not read it. You're like, oh yeah, oil changes. I needed to do that. I didn't know.
Well, it goes back to my point earlier on the stream. It's like we are taking for granted how complicated the systems are underneath the hood now.
Yes, very much so. There's so many layers.
Yeah.
The scariest part, too, is really, especially at least for computers, we haven't been doing it that long, right? We haven't even really had these things in their true form for a century, so we have a lot to learn about how to actually integrate them into our society.
We are the front line of this, of like learning how to work with this stuff. We're the front line of the internet and social media and self-driving cars and all of this. We are the generations that are taking the first stab at this stuff. And I bet you even later on by my kids, by the time my kids are my age, they'll still be working this stuff out. It's going to be a couple of generations at least. And we got the roughest version of it. And I don't mean to make that bleak, because in a way, that's usually when it's the most fun and the most exciting, and there's so much new stuff to learn. And there's so much new energy around that, and there's so much new kind of excitement. Like, in a way, not only is it sort of the shittiest time, but it's also sort of the best time. It's sort of people refer to it as the golden era of technology at some point. The Wild West of technology. It'll be referred, all these cliche terms will be applied to the last 30 years and probably the next 30 years. And we're here right now. And I think in a bit, that's why we do things like these study groups, is we are trying to all pull together and figure this out and try to just keep our heads above water, try to do our best due diligence and keep ourselves informed as fast and as crazy it's moving. And I don't think anybody would argue or dispute that it's moving and evolving faster than it ever has before. And the information and the communication about these changes is getting out there to all of us faster in a way that it never could have before. And we're just doing our best to try to stay on top of it. But when I look at this story here from Bloomberg from the 28th of last month about the systems in their assessor's office straight out of the 1980s, I'm like, that to me, it really resonates with what I fear, in that we are struggling. We are struggling to stay up with all of this stuff, to fully implement it, and it's just we're really on a fine line here. And I don't know. That's what I take away from that story when I read it.
Yep, we just haven't internalized it, right?
Yeah. I mean, and we have yet to really fully take advantage of it either. So, there you have it. Crazy. Anybody in the Mumble Room have an Alexa? Sorry, cancel. Anybody in the Mumble Room have an Echo device? I don't believe you. Somebody in there has an Echo device and they're not admitting it. No way. No way. Liars. Well, really? Elle, you don't have any kind of Echo device in your whole place?
I have a Google Home that stays muted all the time, so I don't even know why I have it.
All right. Okay. All right. So Google Home. Really, guys. Nobody in here has any kind of assistant. Google Home's accepted.
I attempted Mycroft for a while.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
maybe the
somebody's
question
buying
is, why doesn't anyone have it?
I mean, this isn't where I was going with this, but let's face facts here. Like, are we all just letting a new fad pass us by because we're too old? Like, what's happening here? Because these are selling in the millions now.
I have one, and I had it set up for a long time, and then I just recently reset it up to, I wanted to play with integrations for Home Assistant and OpenHab, but I had a period where I just didn't, it was sitting there. I knew where it was. I had all the cables.
They're not quite as,
wasn't
as useful, are they?
Yeah, I mean, there are things, but like I like having background music on for my animals, and so that's nice, but I can do that from my laptop. So there are times where I've already suspended my laptop and it's in my bag and it's slightly more inconvenient, but at the end of the day, is that enough? I don't know. I also like it for listening for podcasts sometimes, but again, I have 1,000 devices to do that.
It's a slow burn. I find the longer you have them, the more you use them. Initially, you use them very, very little because you just don't think to. It doesn't come first to mind when you have a question. You think, I mean, at least for me, I think about doing a Google search on my phone way before I think about asking a lady tube. It doesn't even cross my mind until that changes.
We got a test call going on. Let's see. We've got our instructor for the day over here. Maybe Kenny, can you hear us? Can we hear you?
Come on in. Hello, Kenny. Come in, Kenny.
Let me see.
That's all right. We'll keep talking.
Yeah, that's why we're doing some testing. That's why.
Hey, it's nice that Kenny's here early so we can sort this kind of thing out.
Yeah.
We had Kenny on last week on Linux Unplugged. Chatted a little desktop Linux. He's a longtime Fedora user. Likes himself a little CentOS on the server. I don't know why I don't know what kind of exit that is, but I just got that.
Yeah, let's see. Here's a... Okay, so you guys can hear that, right?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, so that's
nice.
fine.
That's nice. You just bust that out real quick, Wes?
Yeah.
You just had a harp? You just brought a harp to the studio? Huh?
I mean, who doesn't play the harp, Chris?
Well, might as well. We've got a violin and drums, so.
And if you're going to play the bells, he's got to take it up the next notch.
I still have the OpenSUSE bell here. Like, what am I supposed to do with the OpenSUSE bell? It's just horrible. The Fedora bell is much sharper.
I swear I must be on some blacklist with them thanks to you guys. I tried so hard to behave.
Oh, no. It's all in good fun. It's all in good fun. So, Not sure. Not sure why. You know, it's hard, it's a Slack call, so it should be working. Do you want to try Slack call? Well, no. I could try doing a test call with you, Wes, if you think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, it might not be a terrible idea. I'm just yeah.
Are you all right? So are you on the? So if I call you, I'm gonna call standby. I'll call you. Yeah. Whoa, I heard that. So I'm hearing all the sounds out of Airmaster.
Yeah, I thought that might have been the problem, but no, it seems like it's playing sounds just fine.
So I don't think that's it. I don't think that's it. I'd be surprised though if Kenny's having. It was just working. Boop, beep, 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 beep. I would call you, but I don't think that's it because I'm hearing the sounds out of Airmaster.
Yeah. We'll try another test call here.
All right. Very good.
Maybe try it in a Slack channel that I'm not a part of, just in case having that third person affects it.
Oh my God, are you trolling the call right now?
She's everywhere. You
off.
can't escape Elle.
It's funny because I think I message you on one platform and then I go to another and I'm like, just got to keep them guessing.
Yeah, that's how we do it. We move around a lot. We're multi-platform. We're platform fluid. Multi-chat. All of the platforms, really.
Did you
right,
see
if you're
the
listening
new?
live and would? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask you if you saw what the new Choose Linux, I guess, option is, or the Fedora winning. Basically, I'm so excited.
Yeah, new distro challenge. That is cool. That is really nice. I think the Fedora one's a good one because it's like getting closer to the metal with Linux is why I like it. I think that's a good one. I have a bit of a public service announcement to make. If you're listening live and would like to participate, we have a couple of different ways you can do that. First of all, details at meetup.com/Jupiter Broadcasting. So if I'm a fast talker and you miss something, meetup.com/Jupiter Broadcasting. But now, let me tell you how you can participate today. You can join the Mumble Room, like many fine folks already have. Google around for Jupiter Colony Mumble, or again, meetup.com/Jupiter Broadcasting. Also, the IRC Room, irc.geekshed.net, #, Jupiter Broadcasting. You can join us on there. We are streaming audio at jblive.fm, and we are streaming video at jblive.tv. Videos of this may be released in the future, but are not guaranteed to be released. So we appreciate you being here live and joining us on this special study group. There you go. I should just record that and then play it every 5 minutes.
Wait, Chris, I'm confused. So are these going to be released later? What's happening?
Oh man, I'm hiding.
Like how many times? How many times? I'm trying not to swear, but I'm just saying how many dang times, right? How many?
42.
You guys know. You guys, yeah, apparently.
Yeah. Apparently. We're still working the kinks out, everyone. All right.
Yeah. We got to get it right.
We have high quality standards because we know you do.
That's such a handy clip. It really, there's so many circumstances where I have that clip to go to. Well, I've decided that we are going to censor the live stream. So that time, every time we swear, I think we lose a viewer or a listener. So I've decided to put in a real-time AI-based streaming. So that way, if I say something like it'll just beep it automatically without me having to do anything, which I think is pretty cool. It did cost $25,000, so I'll be making a lot of payments on that. Patreon.com/Jupiter Signal, because I got a big fucking bill to pay now.
I don't believe you.
I tell you what, I get no respect. So what's going on over there with you and Kenny? Are you guys sorting things?
Yeah, working on it. Testing. Where's the Star Trek sounds when I need them?
Yeah, I know, right? I got Star Trek sounds. I got all the sounds, man. I don't know if you've noticed, but I got lots of sounds. What are you doing? You doing some intense? That's pretty intense, right?
Pass me the coil spanner!
No, it's the plasma conduit! The plasma conduit!
Test call incoming.
Here we go. That's exciting. Everybody needs a soundboard, really.
Yeah. Okay, so I see a Kenny.
Okay, that's good.
And his preview's
Hi,
looking
Kenny.
sharp.
But we're not getting any levels.
No, I'm seeing a pulse device, and it's selected to the right interface. Let's make sure Chrome's not.
Well, while you guys sort, I'll use the ladies' room and I'll get us ready because I think we'll get it sorted out pretty quick. And Wes, you could always try doing it. You could always try doing a test call with Kenny from your T480 and seeing if if that works. If that has a known good state. Or L, you could do a test call with Kenny and seeing if you have audio, and then we could go from there.
Yeah,
but
that
I'll
might
be right
a
back.
good idea too, because it sounds like he's getting our audio, so it's not everything's broken.
Yeah.
Oh,
oh,
hey,
you're low.
there
Yeah, we hear
go.
you. Oh,
you're
hi,
coming
Kenny.
in real low, but
Oh, hang on. Let me try and fix that. Let me try one more thing here.
I'll BRB.
there's a little bit. I can do a little adjustment on our side too. So when you got a sec, give it another read. Boom.
Let me try something here.
Okay, yeah, still a little low, but
Here we go.
Coming in.
How's? Oh, well. Hello.
hello. Yeah, still
Hello.
kind of quiet, but.
Okay. Any better?
And Hal, maybe you should report because you've got the. How's the mumble room hearing you? Because that's the most important part.
Very low.
Okay. Is this any better?
It's getting better every time you ask.
All right. We'll try this.
Ooh,
Yes!
that's way better.
Okay. We good?
Perfect.
Yay! I got audio.
Master
Happy
of
dance.
technologies.
And, it really helps if you select the right input device. I mean,
It's
that
so
is-
silly how simple it sounds, and yet it's constantly a problem on seemingly all operating systems and setups, no matter what.
It's just like, just pull it up and click the right button. That's all you got to do.
Me trying to get my mic working on different variants of Linux has been a very comical exercise every time I join a meeting. They're like, can't hear you. Can't hear you.
What are you using for your main distribution now?
Ooh, that's a great question because I'm ahead of the curve now. I've been doing the distro challenges with the Choose Linux podcast, and I gave up on the last distro challenge and kicked to Fedora and fell in love with it. And I was lucky enough that the new distro challenge is going to be the exact setup that I already have.
Well, there you go. Even better.
It's been amazing. Like everything that I want to do just works natively. I'm falling in love with Linux again.
And the one thing I will say about, distro hopping is that it also really helps with the window manager that you end up using. I mean, the one thing about Fedora is that they really work hardcore with GNOME upstream. So they build it to make sure that GNOME just works perfectly out of the box. But if you're trying something like with KDE or XFCE or, Enlightenment, whatever, that's where you start running into issues because they focus on GNOME more than anything else. But if you're a GNOME lover, that's great because you're going to have one hell of a good experience with the Linux desktop in that regard.
So at the risk of starting a flame war, I asked this honestly because I've been saying GNOME. Is it GNOME?
Okay, so here's the fun thing. I have spoken with probably about 20 different GNOME developers, and I would say 15 of them will say GNOME, whereas the other 5 will say GNOME. So I'm just erring on the majority. And
Tomato,
also,
tomato.
and I've worked with other trainers that have been doing this for eons, well before us, and they always say GNOME. So I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna stick with the old school.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think it technically is GNOME.
It is definitely GNOME.
Oh,
GNU.
Authority there.
Yeah, GNU. Yeah. Oh, hang on, my dog's whining. Let me try and let her out real quick.
Hello, Chris.
Hello, sir. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Just after a long, weird couple of days.
Oh, are you back a day early, or are you still gone?
I'm still on. It's ended, so I'm just in the just resting at the hotel room and stuff.
Nice. Well, welcome to the study group. We're going to be getting a presentation here from Kenny soon.
Oh, that's good. What's the topic?
Fundamentals of Linux.
Oh, this will be fun. I haven't heard something like this in a while.
Yeah, it is actually fun.
I was going to say, you just missed me singing Fedora's praises.
Damn,
that's true. That's true. Yep.
I'm a fangirl now, and I
for
have
being
no
distracted by
stickers.
OpenSUSE stuff.
Well,
it is nice. You like it? It is nice. Not to spoil it, but it's nice, isn't it? It's nice.
I mean, I heard Chris earlier talking about FUPD and LVFS while I was, trying to get back, and my fingers kept getting really cold, so I shut the phone and couldn't hear the rest because I can't keep the phone open. I can't keep my phone open and have my fingers not freeze.
Gee,
Walking is very
cold.
hard. It's very, very brutally cold.
Yeah. It's surprisingly ridiculously cold in Texas right now. I'm very insulted by it.
Yeah, you're having worse weather than us up there in the Pacific Northwest.
I know. I am very, very aware of that fact, and it offends me deeply that I have traveled this far, and the least I could get when I'm this far south is some decent damn weather.
Hey, at least we're going to Pasadena soon.
That's true. Although it's only going to be in the 50s this weekend, and it's supposed to snow on Sunday or rain or something on Sunday.
They're in flash flood status right now.
I looked.
So
what?
They're in flash flood status in Pasadena right now, so it's gonna be great.
Oh, for goodness sake! Oh, for goodness sake!
Maybe it just follows you around. I mean, in this case, it's getting there ahead of time. It's preparing for you, but
it's got to set up. You got to set up, yeah.
Maybe you should just bring a wetsuit and some snorkel gear.
We will be there when California falls into the ocean.
It's always a good idea.
Learn to swim.
Yeah.
I'm
a pretty good swimmer.
Yeah. Okay, never mind. Yeah. I'm showing my age here.
So we're about 5 minutes out, Chris. You want to do the PSA again on how to join us?
Yeah, I sure could. In fact, we'd love to have people join us. Because, that's the advantage of having this here open mumble room. In fact, I would say if you don't take advantage of it, why would we do it? Right? Think about that. Anyways, that's my long way of saying, come on down. Head on over to lots of different ways. First of all, we'd love to have you join us in Google, Mumble, Jupiter Colony. Or, if I talk fast or you get lost, meetup.com/Jupiter Broadcasting. Go there for the links. Now I'm going to tell you about the IRC room. It's irc.geekshed.net, #, Jupiter Broadcasting. That's where you go if you'd like to chat. Now, if you'd like to take your interactions to the next level, you want to go to the next level,
get out of here.
Then I would like you to join us in the Mumble Room. We got a classroom. You go over, you do a little Google search on Mumble Jupiter Colony. You get in there, you get your mic set up, you join us in the classroom, and now you are asking questions. Boom.
Get out of here.
That's right, a double. So that's 2 different ways. Now, if you'd like to watch the visuals as we go, the video is at jblive.tv. If you're on the go and you need to listen, maybe you're on a phone, jblive.fm. That's how you get that. Meetup.com/Jupiter Broadcasting for additional information, links, and future meetups. There you go.
What a promo. It's like you've been doing this a
while.
Yeah,
thank you. You know what, though? It would have been a lot better if I would have ended it with a...
I do hear knowledge is power.
I feel like there was something there, and I don't know what that something was, but there was something there.
I'm not going to dignify that with an answer.
For what it's worth, I do know what it is, but I just didn't want to say it.
Oh.
We may need some faith healers.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to this. I took the course already. I love them. Yeah, I do. You're right. I love it. I love grabbing like a soundbite. It just has it pays dividends. It really does. Like if Kenny needed to talk about cybersecurity, I've got a soundbite for that.
While you're laughing, the hackers are dropping malware into your system.
You see?
Wow.
So we could just pivot. We could pivot.
That's totally apropos.
Welcome back, Kenny.
That's all you need right now.
Yeah, I was just getting set up in case, you wanted to go from the fundamentals of Linux to maybe like cybersecurity. I got you covered, basically.
Sweet.
Do you travel with those? Can you use those during my talk? If I hit a point where I forget something, just cue.
Totally. I do.
I just can't.
Yeah.
Sounded just like me.
Well, I do appreciate you taking the time, Kenny. I was just I was gonna like talk about how great your course is, but now that you're here, that's embarrassing. But if you weren't here, I was gonna say what a great course it was.
Well, I greatly appreciate that.
I do really like it. It's
All right.
for me too. As I've oh, sorry, I was just going to say, for those of you listening, one of the things that I will say is that Kenny's course is available on the community edition of Linux Academy for a little bit. So after this, if you'd like to go take it, it's over there. Go sign up. It is free, and you can take the full thing.
It is short. I will give you that, but I try to get to the point.
I like that. All right, sorry, Elle, it's all yours.
I was just going to say that it looks like you're already kicking us off. And one of the things that I wanted to go over was the fact that Kenny's course is very much oriented to individuals who are just starting out in Linux. So if you're joining us and you're not a Linux pro, don't worry about it, because this is definitely the right study group to be a part of. Kenny, would you mind telling us a little bit about what this course is that we all keep talking about?
Yeah, so I was given the mandate to do an introductory course to Linux without actually showing Linux or even opening up a terminal, which is pretty much it's pretty much heresy within a Linux world. So with that, that's all I was given to begin with. And so I started doing something like, okay, let's just talk a little bit about Linux, but um I'm a history major and I thought, well, let's discuss where this thing actually came from. Let's put this thing into context as to why it's basically a big deal and how it plays in with the rest of the operating system world and with the IT world in general that we have at large. Upon myself to make a bit of a to some technical topics without actually getting too deep into them, just to kind of give people a broader perspective of what Linux is, what some of the differences are between the distributions, and to help kind of guide them towards trying it out for themselves if they wanted to.
Now, one of the things that Chris and I have been talking a lot about is the differences between, let's say, server-side Linux and desktop Linux. What would you say would you say that this course kind of covers the basics for both, with somebody trying to get the history of it, or do you think you kind of slant more one way than the other?
I wouldn't say I would slant any particular way, to be honest with you, because when you get to the core components within Linux, it doesn't matter what you're running it on. If you're running on a server, a desktop, uh, even like an embedded device where you're using it just as a like a home theater PC system, the core components of Linux are essentially always going to be the same. The ideas behind it, the tooling behind it, the makeup of it, the construction of it is essentially identical between the different types of platforms that you could deploy it to. That's one of the beauties of Linux. Once you have a good firm understanding of what Linux is, how to use it, then you're pretty much good to go on just about any platform that you come into contact with it.
Over the last couple of study groups, I keep mentioning the Choose Linux kind of distribution challenge that I've been going through and learning to use Linux on the desktop. Now, earlier I mentioned that I am getting to use Fedora and learn it. I have to ask, what is someone with kind of your background and your knowledge? What are you running on your computer?
I have predominantly been a Fedora user for a very, very long time, all the way back to Fedora Core 1, and I switched over to yeah, I kick it old school. I switched over to that after Red Hat stopped selling the desktop edition of Red Hat Linux, and they decided to split things up. They decided to focus on enterprise Linux, and a community got together and decided, hey, we still want this to be a regular desktop for people. So they went off with that, and they started the Fedora project, and I've been with it ever since as a user. But I have distro hop before. I've tried OpenSUSE, I've tried Gentoo, I've tried Arch Linux, Ubuntu, straight regular Debian, uh, Sidux when it was a thing. I've tried a lot of them out, and I would say that I always come back to Fedora because it's just what I feel the most comfortable with.
Yay.
I think we're getting some Fedora love in the Mumble Room there. If you're watching us on the live stream, don't forget to join us in the Mumble Room. You can find instructions on how to do so through the Jupiter Broadcasting meetup page, meetup.com/Jupiter Broadcasting. Not as good as Chris at giving that promo, but hopefully it works. So before we get started with actually jumping into a little bit of the history you're going to cover with us, if folks who are listening in want to get started and follow along, what would be the next step beyond taking the course? If they wanted to jump in and actually start using Linux, what would you recommend for them?
Well, after this intro course that I put together, which is like we've already said, it's basically the history of it. And if you actually want to get into the technical meat of the actual topic, then I would suggest, and I'm not trying to do like a shameless plug, but even if it wasn't me doing the course, I would recommend that people go for the LPI Linux Essentials, either the certificate itself, or just take a general course on it. At Linux Academy, we offer a course on Linux Essentials, which is done by me. And again, not trying to do a shameless plug here, but the content that is within Linux Essentials, which it's been put out by the Linux Professional Institute as to what they expect people to understand at that level, covers the basics of some history of the open source movement, different types of distributions, what differentiates between each particular one. You actually have to do some command line work, which is good. So you learn some basic scripting, how to get around on the command line, how to make directories, create tar files, look at log files, do some basic troubleshooting. Just the basic bottom level stuff that you need to know to be a regular Linux user / entry level Linux system administrator.
Oh, that sounds great. All right. Hopefully, everyone has had enough time to join us on IRC and in the Mumble Room. So, Kenny, if you're ready, you can go ahead and kick it off.
Sure. Wes, do you see my screen at all?
We sure do. I'm seeing both of yours right now. I've got that cropped, so it's just the right half. So if you can change it on your side, it'll be slightly better quality, but otherwise we're good to go.
Okay. I think I've got just like one X server running them all together here, but I'll just run with this if that's okay.
Works. Yeah.
So the topic of this is Linux is obsolete, and that may sound anathema to the listeners out there, but there's a reason why this is titled that. If you've already taken the course, I go into the beginnings of Linux and how Linus Torvalds created Linux kernel on his own accord, just because he wanted something to play with. So rather than rehash something that I'd already discussed within the course, which again is free currently right now on the community page for Linux Academy, I decided I would take a component of where Linux began and just kind of expand on that just a wee bit, if you guys don't mind. So the title of this is Linux is Obsolete, a historical look at the argument for the Linux kernel. So we're going to get slightly technical with some theory, but we're not going to get crazy here. So to start things off here, the players of this story, we start with Andrew S. Tannenbaum, who is he's a professor at of computer science at the University of Amsterdam. And he is well known for a book that he co-authored called Operating Systems, Design and Implementation. Now, what this book does is it describes the basics of a computer operating system, the components that goes into an operating system, along with some actual design fundamentals for what you could try to do to code different layers of the operating system. One thing he's really well known for is he is the creator of the Minix operating system, which is a Unix-like clone that was designed for his students, for his courses that he taught, so that people could take apart the code, look at it, try to better understand how a kernel is put together and how it relates to applications that are being run on that kernel. Now, a follower of Andrew Tannenbaum is a guy by the name of Linus Torvalds. And he is a former student of the University of Helsinki in Finland, where he studied computer science. And while he was a student at that school, he developed the Linux kernel, which again was something that he wanted to try out for himself, just to try to understand the operating system core components. After he read Operating Systems Design Implementation, he wanted to try something on his own. So he created a Unix-like clone that he aptly named after himself, just because that's when it comes to anything Unix-based, you have to get some kind of Nix or Nux or some type of sound like that within the title. It seems to be like written in stone somewhere. And he's also well known for writing very entertaining emails on the Linux kernel mailing list. And if you follow Linus's career at all, you know that he's quite vocal when it comes to any type of topic that he feels passionate about. So the concept behind the argument behind Tannenbaum and Torvalds was the design of a kernel for an operating system. Now, I'm not going to get too crazy deep with this because I don't want to bore people to death here with operating system theory. But on the left is a monolithic kernel, which is the core component of an operating system. It's the item that speaks with hardware. It's what handles device drivers, which is the pieces of software that talks to like your network card, your display adapter, your even your keyboard. It also handles how to work with a file system, which is where and how to store files on a computer hard disk, how to read those files, how to organize those files. And it also handles working with your computer's memory, such as your RAM. It needs to be able to map different types of calls. When an application asks for a little bit of RAM, the kernel will handle that for the application by setting aside a location within RAM that the application can speak with. So on a monolithic kernel, all of that functionality is built in with the kernel itself, where you can dynamically load and unload some of this functionality depending on your computer setup. If you have a 3-COM Ethernet card as opposed to an Intel Ethernet card, well, you can load up the Intel driver if you wanted to. And if you had the 3-COM one loaded, then you can unload that one. It all depends on what your hardware is. It's just meant to make the computer operating system run smoother without having to reboot the computer to change pieces of hardware out. Now, this is the design idea that Linux has gone with. On the right-hand side, we have what's called the microkernel, which basically is a lot slimmer. It's easier, in theory, it's easier to maintain because, as you can tell by the size of the stacks, there's going to be a lot less computer code involved with that particular type of software. So the microkernel does basically the same functions as a full monolithic kernel, but in a much more stripped down structure. It's going to do some procedure calls between applications. It's still going to handle access to RAM for different types of applications. It's going to schedule those tasks when, say, an application needs a little bit of processor time to draw a picture on your screen. The microkernel is going to schedule processing time on the CPU to allow that application access to the CPU to do the drawing. Now, instead of having all the drivers and everything like that built into the kernel, like you would have with the monolithic kernel, the microkernel hands all that functionality off to individual applications that will handle that stuff for it. So your ability to communicate with a file system where it dictates how you write your files to a hard disk is going to be handled by a completely separate component rather than the kernel itself. Now, the good thing about that is that with you offloading that functionality to somebody else, you don't have to maintain that code. So that's the sole responsibility of somebody else. Now, Minix uses this particular type of kernel architecture. And Tannenbaum, the guy who came up with Minix, is a hardcore adherent to this design. His belief is that the less code that you have in the kernel, the more secure the kernel can be. So with Tannenbaum being a designer of operating systems and teaching courses in operating systems, he feels or has felt throughout time that this is the absolute way to go. Whereas Linus decided to go with the monolithic design where everything's put into one big single package. So here's the argument from the two sides. And if you look at the actual URL that I put on here, if you go to look it up on the Google mailing list, sorry, my dog's in the background there. The conversation got a little heated between the two of them. So Tannenbaum comes first and says that the reason why the Linux kernel is going to fail and that it is obsolete. And this was written back in 1992. Linus had just announced Linux kernel back in 1991. So within a year's span of time, Tannenbaum comes out and says this Linux kernel idea is terrible. It's not going to work. We're using an older design that was done back in the early 80s and 70s. We're not moving ahead like we should be doing with operating systems. And he decided, or he had the proposal that microkernels, such as what he had used within his Minix operating system and the MS-DOS operating system, which was extremely popular at the time, and GNU Hurd, which didn't quite exist yet, was the format for a modern operating system. And that was the way of the future. New computer software platforms were going to be based on microkernels. And he also argued that the Linux kernel was way too tightly coupled to the 8086, what we now know as the x86 architecture of Intel devices. His complaint was that when you write code for a particular individual processor, such as an Intel 8086, you're going to have an extremely hard time taking that same piece of software and making it run on a completely different processor, such as a Spark processor or a Motorola processor. And again, I'm talking about processors that were very popular back in the early 1990s. just to kind of put this whole conversation in context. And so he felt that his design and his idea for the microkernels was the way to go. Linux was wrong. It's going to fail. It's not going to work. It's not going to work on anything else. It's just basically an exercise of futility. So Linus has seen the mailing list, and he decides, I can't let this go. I've got to respond to this. Now, Tannenbaum is a professor at a well-known university in Europe, and Linus was just a 20-something-year-old upstart who put together his own kernel just for the fun of it. He had no intention of doing anything major with it, but he decides, you know what, I'm going to respond to this anyway. So Linus comes back and says that, okay, all right, Andrew, I'll give you this. Microkernels are actually cleaner in architecture. They're smaller code bases. There's less to maintain. You don't have to worry about trying to get everything packed into one individual package. But there is a speed difference between the two of them. With a microkernel having to hand everything off to other applications, there's that overhead where you have a little bit of a delay. It's a very small delay, but a very little small amount of delay where you have to wait for that communication to come back, whereas the kernel would already have direct access to that information. He also pointed that Minix at the time, nowadays this is different, was not freely available, that you could only get Minix if you were a student of Tannenbaum in one of his courses. And he thought that, well, it's great that you created this operating system for other people to use, but unless you're paying a licensing fee or unless you're actually taking his course, you don't have access to it. You can't look at it and see what you can do to improve on it. And the other problem was that the GNU herd kernel, which Tannenbaum was touting as the way of the future, it didn't really exist in any usable form at this point. It was more or less just vaporware. It was just this idea that we can have a free Unix kernel that would work in tandem with the existing GNU applications that we already know and love within a Linux operating system. But we didn't have the core component, which is the kernel. We didn't have the thing that actually allowed those applications to talk to the hardware. So that's part of the reason why Linus came up with the Linux kernel, not only to experiment with his own design, but to actually get these awesome tools that were available for free on the internet to actually work on a home computer, which was anathema because most people were just using Unix commands on big hardware, big iron as they used to be called. And another thing about what Linus's argument was that Linux was already available. Granted, it was only a year old at this point. It was just within the early stages of its inception, but it was already available. It was free. You can download the source code and do something else with it if you wanted to. And it was actually working. You can take a Linux kernel and put it on a personal computer, which basically at that point in time, they were still expensive, but at least a college student had a better chance of getting their hands on an Intel 8086 or 386 processor and trying this thing out on their own. It was already there. You could do something with it. And that Linus also pointed out the idea that Linux is portable. You could take the Linux source code and you could try to put it on another piece of hardware if you wanted to. And the reason why that was possible is because he tried his best to conform to what were known as POSIX standards. And we still use these to this day, which means that POSIX is looking for a particular set of instructions that are set up as an industry-wide standard to allow a computer piece of software to be able to communicate with the kernel using particular types of system calls. Now, I know that kind of gets out there in the weeds a little bit, and you can look this stuff up on your own. But basically, POSIX is this defined standard of how a computer operating system should work. So Linus had already worked on that to begin with at the outset to try to be as compatible as possible. He also admitted to sticking with the 8086 because that's all he could afford. That's all he had. I mean, the guy was still a college student, and he only had one machine at that point in time. It was the best that he could use. So he wrote for that. But with the code freely available, since it was open source, people could download it from the internet, then anybody else could grab that same source code and try to work on it on their own to make it work with other types of platforms, to make it work on that Motorola 6800 processor or that big Spark processor or something else that was available at the time. So the outcome of all this, so we had the argument between these two guys. Tannenbaum saying that, look, Linux is going to fail. It's not going to go anywhere. Linus saying, look, I'm just trying. I'm just seeing what I can do with this. I only got this one piece of hardware, but other people could do something else with it. Nowadays, we have Linux everywhere. People have heard about Linux. Not as many people have heard about Minix, but people do know about Linux. The kernel developers were able to port the software to other hardware platforms, which helped to expand its growth. So if you could take the same kernel and put on a different type of computer and still use the GNU tools on top of it, well, that gives you the ability to expand the software base so people can work on their own version of a Linux operating system, write software for it that's portable, and other people on different types of computer platforms could use the same applications. It basically broadened the horizons of the Linux operating system because it was freely available for people to work with. And nowadays we have the Linux operating system that runs on various types of computers, from from the little the EPC devices that used to be popular to regular laptops and desktops, to server systems that are still running the internet in the background. We have Linux on smartphones. If you have an Android device, the core components of it still has Linux source code within it. Granted, a lot of the libraries around it are all developed by Google, but the basis of it came from Linux itself. The cloud itself, the vast majority of the cloud is running on Linux. You have companies such as Rackspace, the huge one out there, the elephant in the room, AWS. When you go to an AWS management console, the majority of the operating systems that you had to choose from to launch an instance, to get a server running within just a couple of minutes, is mostly Linux. I mean, they do have Windows offerings, but even the platform of Amazon Web Services itself is actually using Linux underneath everything. Embedded systems, like I talked before about home theater PC systems. We also have GPS devices that we're using Linux embedded within them. Linux has made it into space on various types of space platforms, such as companies such as SpaceX. They've used modified versions of Linux as well. The U.S. military has used Linux in a multitude of capacities. So Linux did essentially win out against the Minix idea, but there is some caveat to that. Also, I just want to point this out, though. Even though there was the argument between Tannenbaum and Torvalds, they have no ill feelings towards one another. They're actually on good, friendly terms with each other. And Tannenbaum wanted to point out that you can have a disagreement over ideas, but that does not mean you're going to actually hate the person. And he really wanted to make that point apparent, because people were trying to take sides with, oh, well, Minix is better, well, Linux is better. But the two of them were like, look, we disagreed on one architectural thing. When a user sits down at a computer, do they really care what's underneath the hood? No, they're there to try to get their work done. They're there just to try to get their word processor up and going. They're trying to get their server going. It's just an architectural idea in the background. So why does this even matter? I mean, why do I even bring this up? Well, I just wanted to point out that the point of history itself is to learn from it. And there is one particular takeaway that I think about when I consider the topic of the argument between Tannenbaum and Torvalds, is that Linus had something usable first, before GNU Hurd even had anything available. And the reason why I'm focusing on GNU Hurd is because the GNU project had all other replacement Unix applications already available for people to use. People who wanted to get away from the very expensive, high-priced licensing environment of the Unix operating system were able to use replacement components from the GNU project. So when they had certain types of applications such as LSCP, the tar commands, things like that, they could use components from the GNU project for free without having to pay any extra licensing problems. The only thing that they had an issue with was that GNU didn't really have a kernel at the core of it to create their own full-fledged operating system. They had the design and the idea for Hurd, but the kernel didn't exist. Linus solved that problem on his own, of his own volition, by coming up with a kernel that would work with the GNU project. So he came out with something before Hurd even came into full-fledged being. And that also brings up another concept, is that there is an old there's an old book that's been around since the 1400s by a guy named Hans Talhofer, and it's a medieval manuscript on sword fighting. This guy traveled from city to city teaching rich barons how to do two-handed sword fighting. And the number one rule that he told everybody was that you need to be there first. If you're going to attack, even if you're going to defend, sorry, my dog is still in the background there. You need to be there first with whatever action you're going to take. Linus was there first. Linus beat her to the punch with a full-fledged kernel that was able to work as a free alternative to the high-cost, super expensive Unix projects. So that kind of goes back to the idea of the old software design adage, where you need to release early and you need to release often. And what that means is that you need to keep the feedback loop of users and software creators moving to help improve the software. So by getting your software out there first, getting it out there quickly, people can try it, people can use it. They can help you find those bugs, they can help provide ideas, and they can help improve on it by providing the recommendations or even fixes themselves back to the original creators, who can then improve on it themselves and keep that loop going. Keep the loop going, so this way the software itself is constantly improving rather than waiting on some big batch feature upgrade where we're going to wait 6 months while we develop this one thing and we're going to test it like crazy, make sure it passes all of our internal tests before we release the new version. Whereas with this concept and what Linus was doing with Linux was put the code out there, constantly improve on it, listen to the feedback coming from people, and try to take their input into consideration to see what it can do to help improve the core software. And that's one of the strengths about Linux and the open source movement, is that with everybody having access to it, everybody has a voice, everybody can provide their input, then it just continuously gets better. And it's just a nice, to me, it's a bit of a superior model over the closed source idea where depending on how many support tickets come in for a particular problem, then that's the feature we're going to work on next. And a lot of the times those support cases will get ignored unless it's coming from a really high paid customer. Whereas the open source movement, everybody's got a voice. So and just for some further reading, in case you're curious, there's a nice article about IBM making an attempt to work on a microkernel themselves, and it failed miserably after they spent billions of dollars on a project. And they even bring up the Linux kernel as to how a monolithic kernel worked better than the microkernel idea. So if you're curious, you can take a look at that article. There's also there's the email thread itself between Tannenbaum and Linus Torvalds himself is listed on the second link there. So if you want to read the thing in full, Linus does get a little heated. I just want to point that out there. So it's interesting reading his work because he kind of gets when it came to Linux, and it's still when it comes to Linux, he takes it to heart because that's basically his baby. And if you want to read a little bit more about the different types of architectures between kernels, I've included the Wikipedia articles here for microkernel, the monolithic kernel, and the hybrid kernel, which if you are a user of the Windows operating system or the Macintosh operating systems, that's where your kernel comes into play. So that's essentially it. I just kind of wanted to point out a single argument at the very beginning of Linux's history between a well-known author and creator of a clone Unix operating system and a guy that was just starting out on his own with the hobby project, and how just one design argument between the two of them kind of helped to blossom into what we now have today with the Linux environment altogether. And to point out that if you're there first with a good idea, that doesn't mean you're going to be successful, but you have a very good shot. And Linus is good proof of that, of being somebody that was there first with an idea and was successful with it. And that's what I got.
Wow, that was great. For those of you who have not had the privilege of learning from Kenny before, I think you will probably join me in telling him that that has to be one of the smoothest presentations I've ever been in. I really enjoyed it, and I really love the history behind it, because I've been in the Linux community for about 5 years, and a lot of it becomes kind of folklore, and you don't really know what to believe. So I really love the links that you shared so we can go back and read up on it. I was going to ask you, how did you get started? How did you get started in the Linux community?
I started kind of like in a sideways manner, basically. Of course, like many people back in the 90s when we first started on computers, as a general user, we started out on Windows, and that was pretty much all we knew. When you work on a computer, that was it. We had some friends that were using like old Macintosh System 7, System 8 boxes, and we loved those because they looked prettier. and they had really cool multimedia. But for the most part, when you got your first computer as a Windows box, and then I got into the Army, and that's when I got introduced to Unix in general. I was a missile systems technician, and we used a system that was using a very stripped down copy of Solaris Unix. And I was like, whoa, this is different. And I actually got introduced to the command line and how to navigate things. And I was like, man, this is pretty solid. And when I got in the military, I went to go work for an ISP. And this is when I learned about Linux, that there was this variant of Unix that you could actually use at home. And back during this time frame, you were able to actually go to a big box store. In my case, I was in Podunk, South Carolina, basically at a Walmart. I look on the shelf and there's 3 different distributions of Linux, one from Red Hat, one from Mandriva, and one from SUSE that you could actually buy that came with all the software and probably about maybe 9,000 pages in documentation and actual paper that you could take home and install on a personal computer. I had built my first computer at this point and couldn't afford Windows because it was just ridiculously expensive. But I could drop down a $20 bill and buy a full-fledged box copy of Windows. And I started out with Red Hat back when they were selling in stores, and it had all the software that I needed with it. And I started off with that, and I haven't looked back. So
Oh man, that's a great origin story. And it really makes me think about how much Linux has changed and how easy it is compared to what you had to go through to get started now with the use of like live CDs and live USB keys. I'm going to introduce one other person who a lot of the Jupiter Broadcasting community probably already knows really well. But if you're new to Linux or you're just starting out and that's why you joined us today, I'd like to introduce you to my friend Joe, who has a great podcast who might help you along the way called Choose Linux. Joe, would you mind telling us a little bit about the podcast and kind of why y'all got started?
Yeah, okay. It's Choose Linux, the show that aims to capture the excitement of discovering Linux. And so I started the show with Jason Evangelo, who writes for Forbes about his journey. He's recently got into Linux. He did, about 10 years ago, get into a bit of Red Hat and stuff, but he kind of thought that was a bit too difficult and, too stressful. So he was using Windows for a long time and Mac OS, and he was doing reviews of graphics cards and gaming stuff. And eventually he just got so fed up with Windows and all the problems there that he decided to give Linux another go. And he started writing about Linux, and suddenly he just managed to grow this community just almost instantly, because it was something that you wouldn't expect to see from Forbes, because they'd never published any Linux content before. And all of us were just kind of so we were reminded of what it was like when we first got into Linux and the excitement and that Jason was showing us. And I just thought, I have to do a show with him. So I got in contact with him, and we've been doing it for a few episodes now, where we just talk about all the stuff that he's been discovering. And I'm kind of a little bit, I've been using desktop Linux for about over 10 years now, so I'm a little bit jaded and cynical, whereas he's this kind of fresh-faced enthusiast. And so I thought it might work quite well, and it seems to be going quite well so far.
Oh, that sounds great. I enjoyed the first episodes, and I really like kind of, I don't want to say the banter between you two, but it's very much done in a conversational tone as opposed to a preachy tone, which I get from some people when they're fairly starting out on their journey. So thanks for adding that to the community. For those of you who might be around at Scale, make sure to join up with us at our Scale dinner, and you'll have an opportunity to talk with Chris and Wes and myself. And if you're going to be going to Linux Fest Northwest, I know, Joe, you're going to be there, right?
Yes, I will be there, yeah.
So you'll get an opportunity. And Kenny, I think you'll be there as well.
Yeah, I'll be there doing an exam cram for the Linux Professional Institute. So if you're looking to study for the LPIC 1, I'll be there conducting some sessions for them.
And also, if you have an opportunity and you follow me on Twitter, today is the last day to vote on what you're going to want to be seeing with these study groups. We're going to turn focus and do more of a kind of full-oriented study group where we talk about just AWS or we talk about just security. Those are the two front runners for the next quarter. So definitely get your vote in. But for now, the next study group is going to be run by my great friend Chad, and we're going to be covering Kubernetes. So make sure to check the Jupiter Broadcasting meetup for that. If you have any questions that we didn't get to, make sure to check the community GitHub that we have set up for our notes. You can add information there and reach out to us with any questions that you'd like to see there. Kenny was kind enough to help me put together 2 exercises that if you're new to Linux, you can give a try and see if you can get yourself oriented around the command line. So I'd love to see what y'all are experiencing there. Chris, you want to have any parting words for us?
No, I just wanted to say thank you very much, Kenny. It was a very, very great course. Took the whole one myself, but I also really appreciated your summary today. And I guess my only last question is, Kenny, what kind of dog do you have?
She's a blue beagle, and she's loud.
Well, I'm glad she could join us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kenny, so much. Thank you we really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, join us next time. Until then, have a great evening.
Thanks, Kenny. You are really good at that, going and reading and filling air like
a natural.
I'm telling you, if this train architect thing it doesn't work out. There may be a future in podcasting for you.
You just let me know. I'll be willing to give it a shot.
Well, for what it's worth, I didn't hear your dog most of the time.
Good.
It wasn't too bad.
No. Quiet her down as best I could without knocking the mic or anything. She finished her dog food and she wants more, but it's like on the other side of the room and I can't get up mid sentence and run over there and feed her.
Well, we have a private Slack that we were chatting about just how slick you were at keeping going there. It was really good. I really liked that presentation, and
thanks.
I really can tell that you're really into it too. Like you can hear there's some passion in there, which is really cool. So
yeah, I'm a nerd. I'm an unabashed nerd.
That's our favorite type of person over here.
That is. That's our audience.
Unless you're a fishy nerd.
Yeah.
What?
I can't.
No, that's true. All right, I do have to run. Elle, thank you. You did great. You are a natural as well, Elle. So
in our private thing, we were saying that Elle needs her own show.
Yeah, it was more like Joe forced me to the realization that I have no choice. We have to do it. We have to.
That's like, I just follow y'all around to all your different ones. What you were going to say, Conan?
I think you're the only person who's actually called me that so far. But yeah, you totally have an interesting perspective. It'd be worth hearing it on a more regular basis.
Yep, I know. We got to do it. Hey, we're gonna be talking about that. Maybe we'll talk about that over dinner.
I haven't been on Choose Linux yet.
I think Choose Linux is probably one of the podcasts. I don't know whether it'd be good or bad if I ever showed up in it.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for making it. Kenny, I really appreciate you taking the time, and I look forward to seeing you at Linux Fest.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, I think that's it for tonight.
Yeah, we got to escape. Shut this Linux system down.
Yep. No! Time to turn it all down. Yep, it is. It's true. All right, everybody. Well, have a great evening.
All right. Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Good night, Elle. Thank you.
Good night.